and welcome to this very special spooky episode where I plan to rank every single segment of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode. So yeah, basically I'm not doing this episode by episode, I'm doing it by every single segment, because it didn't really seem fair to rank them by episode, in case there were ones where like one segment in an episode was really good compared to ones that like the other two were like so-so. It just didn't really feel like it made that much sense to do it that way, so I'm doing it segment by segment. And accidentally, it turns out that I've counted exactly 100 Treehouse of Horror segments here, so that is what I'm going to be ranking here today. But just to set some ground rules first, I do have to say that I'm not going to include any of the intros, even though some of them feel like they deserve it, because they are almost like their own full segments anyway, but a lot of them are really not over a minute long or anything, and it didn't really feel fair to compare them to the 7 or so minute long segments. That just felt like it didn't make that much sense. There couldn't be that much, development in those short little intros, and they just feel like they didn't really count. I don't know, so I'm not counting them here. I also have to say that I am not including 2 episodes from season 34 because they are not streaming on Australia's Disney Plus, and I haven't seen them. So that is the episode Not It, and then there's also a traditional Treehouse of Horror episode that both came out this year. But yeah, I haven't seen them, and so they are not included here. I also have to say that I'm going to be summarizing all of these segments up, so I will be including spoilers. But spoilers isn't really a thing that matters here, but if you're worried about that, there's your warning. So with all that out of the way, let's move forward, not backward, upward, not forward, and twirl towards my ranking. Okay, so coming in at number 100, which I've dubbed to be the worst episode ever, comes season 23, episode 3, segment 1, called The Diving Bell and Butterball, and this is the farting episode. So, the episode starts off with Homer waking up in this weird point of view shot, and it turns out that he was bitten by a spider while decorating the house for Halloween, which paralyzes him. He cannot speak, he cannot move, but soon Lisa realizes that he can communicate via farting Morse code. He farts and she figures out what he's trying to say. And with Lisa's help, he ends up writing like love poetry to Marge. He even writes a whole ass novel until he gets bitten by a second spider, which gives him like these paralyzed superpowers, and he becomes a paralyzed Spider-Man. And yeah, you can't make this shit up. I mean, you can because they did, but this is atrocious. Honestly, out of every single segment of these Treehouse of Horror episodes, this is the one that makes me angry. This is the one that is just so bad, I can't deal with it. Like, it's just so lazy, just a bunch of fart jokes. That's basically all this is. It really, really sucks. Going down the list, you're gonna see that I find a lot of these to be meh, whatever, they're fine. This is really the only one that makes me actually like angry. Yeah, this one sucks. Okay, so moving on. Number 99 is season 32, episode 4, segment 2, called Into the Spider-Verse. And as a total coincidence, the 2 worst ones are Spider-Man themed, which it's kind of weird. Anyway, so upon opening up a portal to various alternate universe Homers, he meets different versions of himself, including a Disney Princess Homer, a pixelated one, a black and white noir Homer, a Yogi Bear one, and some sort of bigger, bulkier Japanese kind of Homer. I don't really know what that one's a reference to, but anyway, it turns out that they all need to go back to their own respective universes or they will die. But Mr. Burns is trying to put a stop to this because he wants to exploit all of the alternate versions for slave labor, basically. And he has his own versions of Mr. Burns' alternates, and they fight to the death. They fight until Mr. Burns just decides to send them all back to their own universes for some reason. I thought that's exactly the opposite of what he was trying to do, but that's how the episode ends, so whatever. This segment really felt like it was just trying to come off as like lol random type of, like, it had that kind of energy and it just came off as really annoying, so that's why it's ranked so highly here. Then coming in at number 98 comes season 20, episode 4, segment 1, called Untitled Robot Parody. Being 2008, this is a Transformers parody. Bart gets Lisa a present in the form of a Malibu Stacy convertible toy, which secretly is a Decepticon or an Autobot or whatever. Anyway, it turns out that a lot of the electronics in Springfield are also Transformers, I guess, and then they fight around the town. Marge, though, convinces them to come to peace and stop fighting, which they do so, but then they decide to team up and turn against humanity. And the episode ends in this kind of like apocalyptic world where all of the Springfieldians are in this giant human foosball table for some reason, and the Transformers have taken over the world. Anyway, one of my favorite quotes from this episode, because I am going to mention some of my favorite moments and quotes going on, but the previous 2 didn't really have very memorable stuff, so I didn't include them. But for this one, there is, "That does not compute. really? Well, maybe it computes a little. One of the Transformers, I don't remember what it's in reference to, but I thought that quote was a little bit funny. And then there's also a moment where Homer is noticing all the robots around him, and he's like, is there something different about this kitchen? And all the robots are like, no, 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 no. And then Homer's like, well, the toaster's never lied to me before. And I just thought that was funny. And it's such a great impression of Homer as well. That's the really great thing about saying my favorite quotes, right? What a great Homer impression. Anyway, coming in at number 97 comes season 27, episode 5, segment 2, called Homerzilla, which is a Godzilla-inspired episode, which is quite bad. A black and white Japanese-inspired Springfield is terrorized by a previously slumbering underwater sea creature that re-emerges. This is, of course, Godzilla, the Godzilla-esque character anyway, in which, in this case, is Homer. In the end, though, he accidentally walks off a stage, though, and it turns out that this has all been this old-fashioned Godzilla type of movie shoot where everything's miniature, and Homer's just been in like a Godzilla costume, smashing little miniature buildings around and all that kind of stuff. But then we cut to the executives discussing why this movie is going to be a hit, why it's going to be great. But then we cut to the premiere of the film, and it bombs, and the only person who bought even just one single ticket was Comic Book Guy, who was actually buying a ticket so he could be at the cinema early for the next Star Wars film. Yeah, I don't know. So what year did this come out? This is one of the later seasons. Is this for The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi? Don't know. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, the movie bombs, and they decide to destroy all the copies by chucking them all in the ocean. While doing so, though, they awaken the real-life Homerzilla in the process, and that's where it ends. He awakens, and then we cut to credits. And yeah, so this was just kind of a nothing episode. It's just not that great. And also something else that really brought this one down, there were a few quite racist accents here that were like supposed to be all like making fun of Asian people and whatever. And it's like, well, that's certainly a choice. Maybe don't do that, especially Bart's character in this one anyway. But yeah, I think there might have been more as well. Bit racist, this one. Bit weird. Weird choice. Anyway, coming in at number 96 comes season 28, episode 4, segment 3, called Mofinger, which is basically a Kingsman / James Bond parody where Bart is trained by this suave badass Mo, who has a secret underground spy cave under the bar. Turns out Homer was also a spy, but was killed, and Bart is here to replace him. Anyway, next sentence, right after that, turns out Homer actually didn't die, and he's like this Dr. Evil type supervillain or whatever, with all scratches over his face, which soon reveals to be by his fluffy white cat, who constantly scratches him, which I thought was pretty funny. Anyway, Mo and Bart fight against him in a fight to the death and whatever, in this great homage to the church fight scene in Kingsman, which was actually pretty badass. There's a lot of carnage and stuff, which, no, isn't necessarily what you come to a Simpsons episode for, but it was kind of cool. But yeah, in the end, the good guys win, and it's kind of just a basic episode from there. You know, this isn't terrible, but it's pretty nothing. You know what I mean? So it gets ranked pretty highly here. Maybe I'm a bit unfair to it. Maybe it's not that bad, but it's not that good either, so that's where it stays. Number 95 comes season 27, episode 5, segment 3, called Telepaths of Glory. In this one, Milhouse falls down this deep hole in the ground in this found footage style segment reminiscent of the movie Chronicle. Down the hole, Bart and Lisa follow, and down there they find radioactive waste, which gives them all superpowers like flight and telekinesis. Milhouse almost immediately goes mad with power though, but then also almost immediately gets taken out by Maggie, who also apparently has superpowers now, and zaps him out of the sky, restoring peace. Yeah, that's something that kind of happens in a lot of these Treehouse of Horror episodes. You can only do so much in about 7 minutes, so Maggie has powers too. That's that's how this one ends. Like, you know, I don't want to be too harsh because this is just a silly cartoon. You're not supposed to take it that seriously. I don't want to heavily criticize it and be like, that makes no sense, plot hole. But you know, Maggie just having powers, it felt a bit dumb. It felt a bit like, oh, okay, that's how you're gonna end it. But I don't know. What are you gonna do with 7 minutes? So that's where we are. Some of my favorite quotes from this episode, though, is Grandpa saying, "I want to know who did it, but not that badly." Like, he doesn't really care that much. And then there's also a quote that is a callback to Milhouse saying everything's coming up Milhouse when he has all the powers. Love a good callback to the classic seasons, whatever season that was. And then there's also one of the best moments. Honestly, I feel like this segment should be higher just because of this quote, but I really do love this quote. So it is of Kang and Kodos, the aliens who show up at the end of some of these segments sometimes. Sometimes the segments are about them, but sometimes they just show up at the end. And that happens increasingly as the seasons go. Like, they used to be in, like, kind of main characters in some of these, and then sometimes they kind of get swept to the side, but always show up at the end. And so they comment on this. "Once again, we just have a cameo." And then the other one says, "Don't complain or they'll put us in 3x4. And oh no, they're doing it now. And the aspect ratio changes with the black bars on the side. And then one of them says, just because it looks like season 4 doesn't make it season 4. And I just love that quote because, you know, it shows that the writers are aware that there are different eras of The Simpsons and that we do really love all the old classic seasons of The Simpsons and that maybe these newer ones are looked at a little bit more harshly. And I just love that self-aware humor, and I honestly just really appreciate it. I thought that was a really clever way of saying that. Anyway, coming in at number 94 comes season 18, episode 4, segment 1 called Married to the Blob. After a meteor hits the Simpsons house, Homer immediately decides to eat the contents inside because he thinks it might be space marshmallows or some shit. Anyway, what comes from this is this insatiable hunger from within Homer as he tries constantly to feed the alien inside. He resorts to eating Snowball 2 the cat, he tries to eat Bart, and then he moves on to eating random civilians. As the hunger grows though, as does Homer, until he becomes a giant blob monster terrorizing the city. Eventually though, he comes to an agreement with the authorities to cleanse the town of the homeless, I suppose, and they get into this weird like trick thing where they pretend like they are letting homeless people into a shelter, but really it's just into Homer's mouth and he eats them and kills them. It's like a whole purge thing, and it's fucking dark. How dark is that? I thought that was surprisingly horrible. There's also a terrible moment in this episode where a song plays, which is I like big guts and I cannot lie. Baby likes fat. And I cringe so hard. I cringe so hard. Yeah, not good. Anyway, coming in at number 93 comes season 26, episode 4, segment 2 called A Clockwork Yellow, which is obviously a parody to A Clockwork Orange. And maybe I'm putting this one up so highly just because I'm not really a fan of that movie. I don't like A Clockwork Orange, sorry. Anyway, in this one, Moe plays the main A Clockwork Orange guy. But when Homer decides to leave the gang and the life of debauchery behind, Moe becomes aimless. He doesn't know what to do with himself, so desperately he asks Homer to join in one last time. So together they decide to break into Mr. Burns' mansion, and there's like a bunch of people over there for a book release or some shit, and they all get into a fight, and that's really about it. That's literally where it ends, and Moe decides he's happy in this violent lifestyle. I don't know, man. I didn't think this was very good. Maybe if you like A Clockwork Orange, you find more to appreciate here. I didn't like it that much. I did like the moment where Stanley Kubrick showed up though, and a moment where somebody walks in on that scene happening in like real life from Full Metal Jacket with the guy with the gun. You know what I'm talking about? Man, dark scene, but funny here. I liked it. My favorite quote from this episode though is when Moe is narrating and he says, "We'd cap the night off with a little of the old in and out." And their version of what the old in and out is the group jumping in and out of the Quickie Mart with the automatic doors, and they go in, they go out, they go in, they go out. Yeah, so that's a lot less dark than that quote's origins, but I thought that was pretty funny. A good misdirect, you know? Then at number 92 comes season 20, episode 4, segment 2 called How to Get Ahead in Deadvertising, which is a parody of Mad Men, a show I have not seen. And basically this is about when Krusty makes Maggie cry at a daycare center by removing all of his images from the walls because of copyright infringement. Homer confronts him about it, which leads to an accidental death where Krusty is obliterated by a wood chipper, which was extremely violent, just by the way, for this cartoon. I thought that was pretty fucking horrible, I suppose. Anyway, but when shady advertisers realize what Homer has done, they prompt him with a mission to kill various celebrities in order to gain the rights to their likeness for advertising, which honestly makes absolutely no sense, but hey, that's the premise we're given, so whatever. Homer then goes on to kill George Clooney and Prince the musician, which is awkward because he wasn't dead at the time. But eventually the dead celebrities, who are now in heaven, band together to crash back down to Earth and attack with guns. And yeah, Krusty blows off Homer's head with a shotgun, and he ends up being in heaven too, I suppose. Everybody just goes to heaven in this show. I don't know why The Simpsons is so like pro-religion and always showing heaven and stuff. I guess they're more making fun of it than being pro, but like, I don't know, there's a lot of heaven and stuff, especially in some of these Treehouse of Horror segments, as you'll find. But anyway, only when summarizing do I realize how stupid a lot of these segments sound. Like, this is just complete nonsense. But when you're actually watching it, you know, it's dumb, but it doesn't seem like complete nonsense. They sell it better than you'd think. Anyway, coming in at number 91 comes season 21, episode 4, segment 3, called There's No Business Like Moe Business. And this is the Sweeney Todd episode. So, in a stage play parodying Sweeney Todd, Homer dies in a freak accident in Moe's bar. Using Homer's blood in the beer though, he finds a secret ingredient that everybody loves. And it has such a strong sensation that Marge even starts to fall in love with Moe, or at least is uncreeped out by him. Anyway, it turns out Homer's character never actually died, and it ends with the cast of this fictional play thanking us all for watching this Treehouse of Horror episode. I don't know, it's fine I suppose. But my favorite moment from this segment is when Marge is reading a letter that's supposedly from Homer, but it's actually from Moe, and it's signed from Bart, Linda, and the other one. And I just love that kind of thing where obviously Mo has no fucking clue what the kids' names are. You know? Explain the joke, why don't I? Then next up at 90 comes season 16, episode 1, segment 2, called 4 Beheadings and a Funeral. And this is a Jack the Ripper / Sherlock Holmes style episode. Lisa, as the famous detective, follows leads like the murder weapon and whatnot to deduce who the mutton chop killer is. In the end, it turns out to be Inspector Wiggum, not Chief Wiggum, Inspector Wiggum. And this segment is perfectly fine for what it is. I'm just not that into the aesthetic, so it kind of gets a low rating here. Sorry if you're a big fan of this one or something, but I imagine there are not a lot of big fans of this one. Maybe I'm being mean. I don't know. But one of my favorite quotes from this episode, though, is Marge being like the old-fashioned kind of character, and she says, "I'm a proper cockney flower girl, I am, and I sees this real strange bloke, out of sorts, mad in the eyes, all kettles and biscuits. Well, he seen I was looking at him. He drops this and runs. Call blimey, skip to me, Lou." And I don't know. I thought that was so stupid. Just how exaggerated her accent is and everything. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I'm sorry if that's dumb. There's also a horrible, horrible quote that is quite dark here where Inspector Wiggum says, "This mysterious Hindu is clearly responsible for the murder," pointing at Apu, who had nothing to do with anything. "Please lock him up till we find somebody darker." That's what he says, until we find somebody darker. How fucked up is that? That's so dark. But I suppose if I want to give props to The Simpsons, maybe they were a bit ahead of their time, making fun of police corruption and stuff. You know, it's not The Simpsons being racist, they're making fun of racists. So, I don't know. I shouldn't be too harsh on this, I suppose. But it was fucking surprisingly dark in the moment. I'm like, oh, fuck, I was not ready for that. At number 89 comes season 30, episode 4, segment 1, called Intrusion of the Poddy Switches. And this is about Springfield being overrun by plants that possess and regrow clones of everybody's bodies. And this one was fine. I don't know. I really have nothing to say about it. I wasn't a huge fan, but it was okay, I guess. Then at pick 88 comes season 18, episode 4, segment 2, called You Gotta Know When to Golem. This is based on a Jewish legend told by Krusty as a magical statue grants any wish you write down and insert into its mouth. But gaining access to this exploits this power, and later Lisa wishes for the golem to gain the ability to speak. We then learn that this mystical monster feels guilty about all the wishes he's granted in the past. And in the end, the way to keep the golem happy is by making a female golem also come to life, and they get married. That's the ending of this. The statue thing gets married. So many of those endings kind of suck, but you can only do so much with 7 minutes if I have to be fair to The Simpsons here. You know, you can't do too much in this limited amount of screen time, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. It gets married and that's how it ends. But my favorite moment during this is during an argument. Who's going to stop us? That golem? The bullies are apparently just aware of the Jewish legends around them. Like, they have no context. They're just like, that golem over there? They already know who that is. I found that funny. There's also a moment where Homer drunkenly walks by the golem and is like, "Hey, Millhouse." I love it. I thought it was fun. Then at 87 comes season 25, episode 2, segment 3, called Freaks No Geeks. And this is the old-timey freak show episode where Mr. Burns runs a traveling freak show. But there's a valuable ring and strongman Homer wants it for some reason, and he plans for Marge and Moe to get married before immediately killing him. That's his plan, I guess, so he can inherit the ring or something. I don't know. But when Marge finds out the plans, she banishes Homer away from her, and the rest of the freaks come to kill him, I guess. This was a very meh one. This was very whatever. Next up is 86, season 31, episode 4, segment 2, called Heaven Swipes Right. When Homer chokes to death on a hot dog at a football game, he's sent to heaven. But there's a problem. It's too early, and his soul is still meant to be on Earth in the meantime. But Homer's body had already been destroyed at this point. So, as a solution, he's sent to another body of somebody who's supposed to die today, to live as them indefinitely. First, though, he goes as a football player, but there's a problem with that. The body doesn't work out because he immediately makes the body fat. So he swipes out and changes to another body, his next choice. Here he lives in Superintendent Chalmers' body now. When he finds out that that guy doesn't make enough money, he ditches that body too. He tries Krusty's monkey as well before finally settling on Moe's body, which he decides to end up living in. And I don't know. It's just Homer living in a bunch of bodies, which is kind of a fun premise, but wasn't executed that well. I didn't really like this one all that much. Sorry. Then coming in at 85 is season 20, episode 4, segment 3. It's The Grand Pumpkin Millhouse, a parody of like Charlie Brown cartoons or whatever. I'm not really that familiar with those. Extremely unfamiliar, I would say, actually. So I don't really know. This is mostly about how Millhouse is obsessed with the idea of the Grand Pumpkin coming to visit him on Halloween. And then when the pumpkin shows up, the pumpkin pumpkin realizes how humans mistreat pumpkins around Halloween and swears revenge and begins to like rage and eat people and stuff. When Lisa realizes the thing that brought the Grand Pumpkin into manifestation though was Milhouse's belief in it, she convinces him of a giant talking turkey to believe in, which he immediately does, and the turkey kills the Grand Pumpkin, saving them all, before the turkey also realizes that people treat turkeys bad at Thanksgiving time, and the cycle begins and the turkeys kill everybody and all that kind of stuff, and swears revenge. Anyway, one of my favorite quotes from this segment is when the Grand Pumpkin drops the bombshell of all pumpkins are racist. All of them. I also like the quote, "I even baked you a loaf of homemade pumpkin bread." This is Milhouse to the pumpkin. Then the pumpkin says, "Well, how delightful. Bread made especially for pumpkins." And then he's like, "Actually, it's made from pumpkins." And yeah, then the pumpkin freaks out. This is just explaining the joke, I guess. That's what some of these parts are in this video. I don't know. Maybe you enjoy me clumsily pointing out why things are funny. And I'm going to continue doing it, so whatever. Coming in at 84 is Season 8, Episode 1, Segment 2, called The Genesis Tub. And I've never really been a fan of this one. I just always found it kind of boring. I don't know. This is the one where Lisa accidentally creates a miniature living world in her little science experiment and accidentally becomes their god as they worship her tooth. And Bart kind of terrorizes her and her little science project, doesn't take it too seriously. But then the little people try and retaliate and everything, and since they're small and they evolve really quickly, they're basically like our future. They've surpassed us in like technology and everything. Anyway, soon enough they recruit Lisa and they shrink her and bring her into the world. Bart ends up stealing the science project though, takes it to school and whatever and as his own, and that's about it really. There's not really any real conclusion here. Lisa's just stuck there now. I don't know, I'm not really a fan of this one. Anyway, my favorite moment in this is after giving Bart the prize for the best science experiment, which is actually Lisa's, he says, "We've found the winner. Willie, you can throw out the other projects." Just get rid of them all. So unnecessarily mean. I love it. Anyway, next up at 83 is Season 13, Episode 1, Segment 2, called Whiz Kids. Segment 3. Sorry, called Whiz Kids. And this is basically the Harry Potter episode. The toad that Bart tries to transfigure, which becomes a disgusting vomiting goblin, is absolutely iconic, as he says, "Every moment I live is in agony." I do really like that. Which sounds fucked up when I say that. But anyway, the rest of the episode is about when Mr. Burns' Dark Lord Monty Mort sees that Lisa is a powerful witch. He captures Bart to get him to help take her down a peg. Together they swap her wand out during a pivotal moment, and in the middle of that, Monty Mort attacks. The two quickly take him out though by attacking his weak spot, his shin, the source of all his power apparently. Yeah, I don't know, this one was super lackluster. I wasn't a huge fan of this one. And I thought I'd lump the next one in together because they're kind of relevant to each other. 82 is Season 22, Episode 4, Segment 3, called Tween Light. That's right, we are in the modern day of The Simpsons for sure, or at least retroactively modern, because it feels modern, but really once you think about it, Twilight's pretty outdated by itself nowadays. But yeah, basically the cringe. The cringe comes with the Tween Light episode. Cringe. They're making fun of Twilight. I can't believe we're here. So a new boy, Edmund, shows up at the school and all the girls are into it. Surprise, surprise, it turns out that he's a vampire and Lisa starts a relationship with him. They invite Edmund over for dinner at the Simpsons house and he brings his dad, who is Dracula. I love the fact that them being vampires isn't a secret as well. Like the fact that everybody just knows about it. It's so stupid. Anyway, it turns out that they all eat Ned Flanders for dinner. Yeah, Homer just killed him, I suppose. So Edmund and Lisa fuck off for a bit. They go to Dracula Land to try and just get away from the family for a while. Yeah, they go to this Dracula Land where all sorts of vampires reside. Anyway, so Dracula and Homer go after them though. And in the end, Dracula sees that Lisa is accepting of all vampires and he approves. But once Lisa realizes that she'll be stuck being 8 years old forever, she backs out. The vampires then come after her. But Homer comes to the rescue, getting himself bit instead. Killing the vampires though because his blood is full of cholesterol. Lisa's safe and Homer's a vampire now, and then he tries to fly away, but his vampire bat self is too fat and he can't fly away. This is The Simpsons. Of course they had to end with a fat joke. Are you serious? There's a lot of that in The Simpsons if you hadn't noticed. Anyway, next up at number 81 is Season 12, Episode 1, Segment 2, called Scary Tales Can Come True. This is the Hansel and Gretel episode. After being fired, Homer abandons Bart and Lisa because he cannot afford to have them anymore. As he says, "No child will starve in my home." So literally, he just gets rid of the children. That's how he solves that problem. Anyway, While out in the wild, Bart and Lisa come across an old lady in her house who is clearly a witch and is planning to eat them. They're made to do chores and are fatten up, but Homer comes to the rescue, killing her by chucking her into the oven. One of my favourite moments from this episode is that George Cauldron, the witch's obviously fake boyfriend, turns out to actually be real. There's also a moment where Goldilocks is being killed by the three bears in a surprisingly brutal way. It's mostly off screen, but her screams and the blood seeping through the door is fucking disturbing. Anyway, there's also a moment where Marge is seemingly offended that Homer just abandoned their kids as she says, "What? We could have sold them." This Treehouse of Horror segment is very mean-spirited, by the way. Coming in at number 80 is season 31, episode 4, segment 3, When Harry Met Slimy. Selma falls in love with Kang the alien, who's being kept in a lab and experimented on. Together with the help of Homer, though, they break out, and Patty falls in love with Kodos too, so they all leave together. How romantic. My favourite moment in this episode is when, in a chase, Mr. Burns says, "Don't shoot at the van, shoot at the driver." And then the shooter shrugs and he shoots the driver of the vehicle that they're in. Coming in at number 79 is season 23, episode 3, segment 3, called In the Navi. As if this segment isn't called Join the Navi, just by the way. I thought that would be a clever little callback. But anyway, yeah, so basically this is Avatar. It's Avatar, you get it, it's Avatar. Bart is transferred to a Kang and Kodos type body. Soon, while undercover though, he starts a relationship with one of the aliens, Carmela. And upon meeting Carmela comes one of my favorite quotes where after he is saved by her, he says, "Thanks, dude." And she says, "I am a female." And then he says, "You don't have to yell." And then she says, "I'm not yelling. This is my seductive voice." I like saying my little favorite moments, but every time it happens, it feels awkward because I'm just here in a room by myself. I find them funny. Anyway, after connecting with the aliens, Bart decides to side with them in the fight amongst them and the Marines he came with. They defeat them, and that's really it. That's how it ends. Coming in at number 78 is season 19, episode 5, segment 3, called Heck House. When Bart realizes that trick or treat isn't just a phrase but a verbal promise, he convinces his friends to give the adults of Springfield a bunch of shitty time pranking them around the town. They later all show up around the Simpsons house to complain and get revenge by scaring them. Flanders sets up the church to look like this hellscape where he is Satan, and then I guess it's not fake anymore and they really just actually are in hell, and that's kind of how it ends. They're just in hell now. It's kind of stupid. During this hell simulation that actually turns out to be real though, Flanders fakes, or doesn't fake, the 7 deadly sins to set as examples for the kids. And one of my favorite ones is of pride, where Dr. Hibbert is shown getting hit by a car, and he's just like, "Why did I take pride in my kids' accomplishments?" The whole thing ends with Ned just going on about how all sinners will go to hell or whatever. It's meant to be dumb and over the top, but it's also a bit dumb. Which is meant to be dumb. Anyway, one of my favorite moments from this is when the kids are pranking all the adults around town, and Lenny is tied up as the kids are walking out with all of his possessions, clearly just robbing him. It's not really much of a prank, and he just says, "How is this a prank? Give me back my TV." They're just robbing him, and I kind of appreciate that for some reason. Number 77 comes season 17, episode 4, segment 1, called BI, Bartificial Intelligence. After Bart tries to jump from a pool from a very high-rise balcony, he falls and hits the ground. Now on the brink of death in the hospital, the Simpsons decide to replace him with a robot son who's perfect in every way. But when Bart awakens from his coma, he comes back and the two compete for the family's approval. Eventually, Homer abandons Bart in the wild, where he comes across a camp of robots. Stealing their parts overnight, he returns to the Simpsons house for revenge via a self-made mech suit, this giant mech suit. The segment ends when Homer wakes up from a nightmare though, where it's the Exorcist and he's being possessed, and yeah, I don't know, man. There's only so many ways you can end these segments sometimes, I suppose, but it was a bit dumb. Anyway, my favorite moment from this episode is when Homer is abandoning Bart and he says, "David feels, and your mother will agree when I tell her, that it's best for our family if you're no longer in it." Which is mean and dark, but also hilarious, especially since he didn't actually tell Marge yet, but knows that she will agree. Next at 76 comes season 28, episode 4, segment 1, called Dry Heart. This is set in a dystopian future where water is scarce and is treated as a valuable currency, and we see as the evil dictator, played by Mr. Burns, explains a Hunger Games style premise. I do love the part where Mr. Burns is just carelessly wasting tons and tons of water on camera for everybody who's basically dehydrating to just watch sadly. Anyway, the Hunger Games thing takes place, and Lisa is Katniss, Homer is whatever Woody Woody Harrelson's character's name was again, and a bunch of kids died. But then Lisa decides to rebel and fight against the powers that be, and everybody follows her. They go off on a Mad Max style kind of chase thing. There they decide to break the damn wall down where all the water is kept, but then they realize straight away that was a bad idea when it immediately dries up, which is probably where the segment probably should have ended, just by the way, but it keeps going. It starts to rain and they're happy, but then it floods and they essentially live in the ocean now. Then the ocean freezes over and now it's a frozen dystopia like you'd see in Snowpiercer. And that's it. Yeah, this went off the rails real quick. I didn't love the ending. I don't know. Then next up at 75 is season 33, episode 3, segment 2, called Nightmare on Elm Tree. The Simpsons treehouse is struck by lightning and comes to life and begins terrorizing Springfield. The tree then brings all the other trees to life and there's an army of trees trying to take over humanity. You know, because of pollution and whatnot. It's a metaphor, don't worry about it. This segment ends with a brawl between the people and the trees win. One horrible moment from this segment that I just think is absolutely embarrassing and just, oh god, I do not like it at all, is when we see that one of the mutant plants, which is actually from the intrusion of the potty switches segment that I mentioned before. Yeah, one of those plants is just on the street and is asking to be fed by the trees. One of the trees says, "You're not a tree, you're a plant." And then the plant says, "Yes, but I identify as a tree. I'm a trans plant." Yeah, that's where they fucking went with that. Jesus Christ, that's a boomer joke and a half if I've ever heard one. I also did love this moment where Homer seductively says, "Ooh, Marge, I did a chore today." Just one chore. And that's like sexy to Marge. Anyway, next up is Pick 74, season 25, episode 2, segment 2, called Dead and Shoulders. This is the Bart's head on Lisa's body episode. Bart and Milhouse fly kites around the airport, disrupting aircrafts, and a helicopter crashes into it and ends up decapitating Bart. He wakes up with his head sewn onto Lisa's body and the two naturally clash as they share a body. But when Bart realizes he can control her body when Lisa's asleep, he plans to keep her that way by using sleeping pills and trying to kill her. He attempts to cut her head off at a sawmill but fails when she wakes up. Both their heads are cut off in an accident and they both wake up on other people's heads. Bart on Patty or Selma and Lisa on Krusty the Clown for some reason. And my favorite moment in this segment is when Bart and Lisa, who were still combined at the time, are seeing a therapist. And the therapist basically, after having like one little moment of progression with them, says, "And that's all the therapy your parents can afford." Then Homer comes in and he's like, "I have this 2 heads for 1 coupon." And then she says, "That's for lettuce." I don't know, it's dumb. Next up at 73 comes season 13, episode 1, segment 1, called Hex and the City. The Simpsons visit a fortune teller, but when Homer's buffoonery sets her place on fire, "Why didn't I see this coming?" she yells at herself as it does happen. She curses him, telling him that bad things will come to those that he loves. First up, Marge grows a beard, then Bart's neck becomes a noodle, then Lisa grows hooves for feet. After that, Lenny and Carl suggest getting a leprechaun to fix the curse, or as Lenny says, "Or Jesus, here's like 6 leprechauns." And then Carl says, "Yeah, but a lot harder to catch. Go with the leprechaun." So Homer goes and gets a leprechaun and returns it to the fortune teller. When Homer first returns though, the fortune teller is all like, "Ooh, hey, it's the cursed one. How's the curse I cursed you with, Kirsty?" And then Homer says, "I know you don't remember me, but here's a little revenge," Irish style. And then he lets the leprechaun loose and whatever. But then the fortune teller lady and the leprechaun then fall in love and they get married, but then they have sex in front of everybody at the wedding for some reason, and that's how the segment ends. Yeah, this segment was just in a silly, goofy mood. It's bad. Anyway, next comes Pick 72 at season 31, episode 4, segment 1, called Danger Things. And yes, we're getting very modern now. You know, we see as the Simpsons parody fucking Stranger Things of all things, and it feels weird seeing them cover very new popular things like this. I'll just never get used to it. Same goes for whenever they deal with like iPhones and stuff in The Simpsons in the newer seasons. It's just not right. It doesn't feel normal. They're supposed to be set in like the 90s or whatever, you know. It's strange. Anyway, in this episode, on his way home after hanging out with Bart, Milhouse is taken to another dimension called the Over-Under by some monster. In an attempt to save him though, Lisa goes to this dimension before finding out that they're stuck there. But it's not so bad because housing is affordable there and the schools are excellent. They live with the monsters in the end, and that's about it. Next up is 71, season 24, episode 2, segment 1, called The Greatest Story Ever Hold. This is the Black Hole episode. Welcome to the grand opening of our whatchamacallit. Mayor Quimby says at the very start of this as he unveils their science experiment. I love the lazy writing jokes as it just points out how obvious the lazy writing is. That joke always works for me. Anyway, in this this episode, when a black hole emerges from this science experiment gone wrong, Lisa desperately seeks to help Springfield. As it sucks everything in its path, she takes it home to keep it in the basement safe away from everything. But as more gets sucked in because the Simpsons keep throwing away in their junk and their enemies, it grows. Soon their house gets destroyed and sucked in, as follows the rest of the town. In the black hole, they find appreciative aliens who treasure their trash though, and it's kind of this weird happy ending. It's also kind of this weird lazy happy ending. A lot of the endings of Treehouse of Horror segments are either lazy and they're happy and something just fixes everything, or they're lazy and just everything's bad. That's the main two endings that you get with these sorts of things. Next up is pick 70, and this is season 21, episode 4, segment 1, called Dial M for Murder or Press Hash to return to main menu. This is a black and white episode for no real reason, but it's kind of a cool look. And in this episode, when a random student that we've never seen before named Hubert Wong wins some sort of student president thing or something over Lisa, Lisa slags him off and is sent to detention. There, Bart pitches his help to get revenge on Miss Hoover. In return, Lisa will get revenge on Mrs. Krabappel. There's a misunderstanding between Bart and Lisa though, when Bart apparently meant that they were going to kill each other's victims, but Lisa only meant to prank theirs. Bart is super bloodthirsty in this one though, and it's hilarious. He also kills Principal Skinner for Willie for some off-screen reason, some agreement they came up with off-screen, which is also funny. But anyway, in the end, Lisa realizes that he's gone insane and goes after him, attempting to kill him instead of helping kill the target that they agreed on. Which she does, but kind of accidentally, as they're on this merry-go-round, and the knife accidentally goes into him, the knife that she has. I didn't establish that there was a knife, but they were fighting and she had a knife and then he gets stabbed. Anyway, this epic kind of climactic fight on the merry-go-round between Bart and Lisa though is kind of awesome. It was animated really well. I like that about that. Anyway, at 69 comes season 18, episode 4, segment 3, The Day the Earth Stood Stupid. This is a sepia-toned, old-fashioned episode parodying the original War of the Worlds radio play. Turns up to 11 though when we see that the Springfieldians who hear the segment go absolutely apeshit. Homer kills Lenny due to paranoia, the cops have bought their weapons and vehicles, crowds riot, etc. Finally, they all decide to take off their clothes and roll around in the mud and make animal noises for some reason. But when Lisa reveals that the radio show was just a hoax, everybody feels stupid for a moment, before Kang and Kodos actually attack and destroy everything. This ends with I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, the song, and it got me in the end with the Fallout vibes. And I kind of liked it a bit, you know? It's still higher up, it's still not that great a segment in the grand scheme of things, but I didn't mind this one too much. Number 68 is season 16, episode 1, segment 3, called In the Belly of the Boss, the Fantastic Voyage Shrinking episode. That's a movie I've never seen. Sorry, Erica, the unapologetic geek, I haven't seen that movie. Anyway, at a science convention, Maggie is accidentally shrunken during an experiment by Professor Frink. He allows a lot of these sci-fi horror episodes, just by the way, I came to realize when I was going through these. Professor Frink does some sort of fucked up experiment and things screw up accidentally, and you get a Treehouse of Horror episode. It probably entails 10% of them or something like that. Anyway, Maggie is then placed in this medicine capsule unknowingly, and Mr. Burns takes it in hopes for health. Once they realize Maggie is in his body though, the Simpsons go on a mission to shrink themselves and fly a spaceship type aircraft into Mr. Burns' body. It's just like that Futurama episode, which is based on that old movie that I mentioned before that I've never seen. Anyway, this segment eventually ends when they all run out of time for the mission and the family all escapes except for Homer, who grows to his normal size in Mr. Burns' body. But because he's like old and stretchy and stuff, they both just occupy this body as Homer's like got a head over here under his skin, and it's kind of gross and disturbing. Anyway, but they both kind of seem happy, and this is a weird happy ending, I guess. Anyway, my favorite moment from this episode is when Marge is telling Bart to stop peeing during the mission. Marge says, "Stop that. We're guests in Mr. Burns." Next at 67 comes season 2, episode 3, segment 3, called The Raven, and I think this is going to be a pretty unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people are quite the fan of this one, and I think that I'm probably going to piss some people off with this pick. Sorry, I'm just not the biggest fan of it. So, this is an Edgar Allan Poe send-off where Homer assumes position of an educated poet, and along with a deep voice and rhyming narrator, we see as he's haunted by a raven with Bart's head and personality. By the end, Homer just gets pissed off and riled up, and it's funny to see in comparison to the calm narrative and storytelling it's centered in. This is a much more of an atmospheric kind of episode. I do like the sort of rhyme and the creepy kind of factor to it and everything, but it's just not that funny, so I'm not really that big a fan of it, sorry. Next up at 66 comes season 27, episode 5, segment 1, called Wanted, Dead Then Alive. This is where Sideshow Bob successfully lures Bart to the music room at Springfield Elementary and shoots him with a spear gun. Weirdly disturbing, by the way. He dies like slowly, and then Sideshow Bob takes a selfie with him. He has a musical number where he takes his intestines out and wears Bart's intestines like a scarf, and he drinks a glass of his blood like wine. And it's kind of fucked up, especially when you consider that Bart is just this 10-year-old kid. Anyway, the point is, the premise is that he has finally killed, but he's finally accomplished his goal after all these many years. And once he does so, though, he realizes that his life has become meaningless and boring. Like the Joker says in The Dark Knight, I don't want to kill you, you complete me. And he's like a dog chasing a car, and he wouldn't know what to do with it if he ever caught it. He, being Sideshow Bob, realizes that nothing feels worth it anymore. So he decides to try and reanimate Bart before quickly killing him again. And one of my favorite little quotes here is when Homer sees the button for reanimating, and he's like, reanimate? And he looks around. The animation looks pretty good to me. Like, good enough to me. Like, it's a little animation joke, okay? Anyway, so after this, a series of killings and reanimations begins, where Sideshow Bob keeps killing Bart in numerous different ways before Lisa finally finds Bart's body and the Simpsons reanimate him one last time and kill Sideshow Bob. Finally, they decide to be cruel though and reanimate Bob while combining him with a chicken body. And that's it, that's how it ends. Sideshow Bob now has a chicken body or something. I don't know, man. But there also was, I need to mention, a little callback to Sideshow Bob walking into the rakes and going "Rrr," like in that one episode, and you love to see it. Next up at 65 comes season 24 episode 2 segment 3 called Bart and Homer's Excellent Adventure. Basically, this is the Back to the Future episode. Wanting a classic comic book that cost 25 cents in 1974, Bart finds the opportunity to go back in time. Quickly he reads the comic and concludes it as pretty mid. that's too modern a term, right? But he deems it as just okay. Anyway, while in 1974 though, Bart witnesses Homer and Marge's meeting in high school, realizing if they never get together that he might end up with a better life without them, which makes no sense because you'd think if they never meet, he's never made, but he comes to the conclusion that he will live a better life. And it turns out he's right, because he decides to make sure they don't end up together, then goes back to the future and, returns to this lifestyle where he's just rich, where Marge and him basically live in this big mansion and his dad is Artie Ziff now. And yeah, so it's like this better life or whatever. Unknowingly to Bart though, Homer also returns back to the future with him and attempts to win his life back, basically, with all the different versions of timelines and stuff of Homer that shows up as well. They try and all convince Marge to be with him and whatever, and she sees that literally every version of him loves him. Ah, how romantic and whatever. Anyway, my favorite moment from this episode is when Homer is unfazed by seeing a time-traveled version of himself, and he's just like, young me, what brings you to the present? I don't know, I just found that funny. Then at 64 is season 3 episode 6 segment 3 called Homer's Nightmare. Now we're talking early stuff, and it's not bad, but it's not quite there yet with the best of them yet. So this is the episode where Mr. Burns combines a robot with Homer's brain in a mad scientist Frankenstein parody. Rather than being a powerful assistant though, the robot is an idiot because it's just Homer and just wants donuts and to sit around. Kicking the robot in frustration, it falls on Mr. Burns' body and he is entirely crushed. Now with Homer's brain returned to his body, they also decide to chuck in Mr. Burns' head onto his body too, and they live together in harmony, or not harmony, or whatever. And my favorite moment in this little segment is when Mr. Burns and Smithers are like grave robbing, and it's hilarious. Mr. Burns just doesn't give a shit, and Smithers is like really worried and whatever. Anyway, Smithers asks, what corpse should we unearth? And Mr. Burns says, oh, I don't know, I feel like a kid in a candy store. Next up is 63, season 31, episode 8, segment 3, called The Last Thanksgiving, the First Blargs Giving. And this is a weird episode that was like part of a Thanksgiving kind of Treehouse of Horror mashup. And this is a parody of the 2017 movie Life, the 2016 film Passengers, Alien, The Blob, and any other number of sci-fi horror movies. Set in space during a long intergalactic travel, a blob monster attacks the spaceship that the children of Springfield are in. In the end, Bart and Lisa suck the blob into space and they crash land on some sort of extraterrestrial planet, along with Marge and Homer and Santa's little helper, who were also there, whose pods re-emerge, and they all have a happy Thanksgiving together with the alien inhabitants of this planet. Feels a little bit like a child wrote that ending, but that's okay because the rest of it was kind of cool. I don't mind this one too much. Next is 62 is season 30, episode 4, segment 3, called Geriatric Park. The Simpsons visit Geriatric Park, where they have left Grandpa thinking it's a normal retirement home. Run by Mr. Burns, of course, though it turns out to be that he's combining the elderly with dinosaur DNA, which is left dormant when cold. So when Homer turns up the temperature, the dinosaur cells start re-emerging, and all the old people become, these giant dinosaurs and terrorize everybody. and they take over the park. When Lisa tries to appeal to Grandpa's sympathy, though, they find out that the only thing the old dinosaur people wanted was to be treated with respect. And they leave happily, not caring that all of the old people are dinosaurs. Next up is 61, season 19, episode 5, segment 1, called E.T. Go Home. When Bart is sent into the backyard to get whatever the hell butane is for Marge's cooking in a pantry that is never there otherwise in the backyard, just by the way, he comes across an alien Kodos and makes friends with him. In an attempt to help the alien, Bart and Lisa do various tasks for him, all of which are very obviously leading to bad things for humanity. Later, Kodos brings in the cavalry of an army of more aliens, but the US Army and Homer with a minigun defeat them. The lesson ends up being that you can judge a book by its cover. One of my favorite moments of this segment is Homer getting into the shower unknowingly with Kodos, and he's like, ooh, Marge, your tentacles feel so good. Anyway, next up at 60 is season 3, episode 6, segment 2, called Bart's Dream. Bart has powers to hear people's thoughts, and all of Springfield is scared of him and obey him to keep him happy. Krusty has been on TV for 300 plus consecutive hours, the school tests change to conform to his answers, and the whole town must only have happy thoughts. That is until Homer has had enough and decides to attack Bart, who promptly turns him into a jack-in-the-box because he has a bunch of other powers too, with a spring head. The two, though, bond now and spend time together and learn to love each other until Bart changes his body back. Back in reality, though, Bart wakes up screaming after feeling affections for his father. The best part of this episode is when Bart pranks Moe, and Moe basically, it's that line where he gets tricked into saying, I'm a stupid moron with an ugly face and a big butt, and my butt smells and I like to kiss my own butt. Next up at 59 comes season 7, episode 6, segment 1, called Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesores. This is the one where after lightning strikes the Lard Lad statue, it comes to life with a Godzilla scream, and all the other giant advertising mascots in town also come to join in and wreak havoc on Springfield. Eventually, the people figure out that the statues and stuff all have the Freddy Krueger weakness, where if you just stop believing in them by not looking at them, they all get taken out. This segment's alright, but it's kind of vanilla, you know? Then at 58 is season 29, episode 4, segment 2, called Coralisa, a parody of the movie Coraline. When Snowball comes across a secret door and Lisa follows through to a portal to a 3D animated world where everything is seemingly perfect. Whoa, for a Halloween show middle segment, this is amazing, Lisa comments. But not everything is perfect. When she realizes everyone has button eyes and things are creepy. But when they want to put buttons in her eyes, she leaves before immediately deciding to go back when she sees that Homer in the normal world is just horrible. He's killed a snake with her saxophone and he's a crappy dad and whatever. So she's like, nah, fuck it, let's go back. Let's go back to the Coraline world. And she says, buttons, please. Back in the normal version of reality, though, Homer realizes something is missing. Didn't we have another kid between Bart and the baby? He asks. Anyway, then Bart follows into the Coraline world and gets button eyes. Then Marge does, and Homer decides to go in to try and get his family back. In the Coraline world, both the versions of the family fight before realizing they can actually live together happily, and all do, but in the 2D world, probably because it was cheaper to animate. Then at 57 comes season 4, episode 5, segment 2, called King Homer. And I feel like this one is obviously going to be a pretty unpopular opinion as well. I think this will be at the top of a lot of other people's lists, but yeah, not the biggest fan of this one. This one is basically King Kong. Mr. Burns takes Marge to Skull Island to exploit King Homer and acts super obviously suspicious. Eventually they decide to gas King Homer and take him back to New York where, well, again, King Kong happens. Homer climbs the tower but gets too tired just a few stories up high and falls, but because he's not up that high, he's fine. So Homer and Marge live happily ever after, and Homer eats Marge's dad, who we just get a glimpse of, and Marge finds this charming, I suppose. Some of my favorite moments from this episode is one moment upon the reveal of King Homer to the people of the city. Barney says, "Wow! Look at the size of that platform." Yeah, that's a great Barney impression, isn't it? I do love that moment though. It's always those misdirects, you know? You think they're going to think of something like logical, but then it's just some other random bullshit that they're impressed by or that they're saying or that they're intending or whatever. I love those kinds of jokes. Yeah, basically this is just, it's a creative kind of episode. I like the black and white look to it. It makes it look kind of cool. It fits the whole King Kong thing. But I do have to say that I don't know. I don't love it. I'm sorry. I don't love it. Also, Marge's screams in this episode, because she's constantly screaming because of like King Kong and stuff, is very annoying. Her voice gets grating. But, you know, I don't want to complain too much about that. Next at 56 is season 12, episode 1, segment 1, called Go 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 Ghost Dad. After reading a horoscope warning of his death, Homer goes on to avoid death despite heavily dangerous injuries constantly occurring, like pickaxes twirling into his head and rattlesnakes biting his arm, all before choking on a piece of broccoli. Before being allowed to heaven, though, Homer is assigned to do one good deed before the end of the day or whatever. Of course, Homer being Homer, though, that is not quite that simple. First, he accidentally kills Agnes while trying to help her across the road. Eventually, he does his good deed by saving a baby from rolling down the road. But the Saint Heaven dude wasn't watching at the time, and so he's damned to hell anyway, and that's how it ends. I do kind of like that. That's a funny ending. Next up at pick 55 is season 22, episode 4, segment 2, called Master and Cadaver, which is actually a really clever title if you actually think about it. This is the boat murder mystery episode, which opens with Homer coming out of the shark from Jaws' mouth, only to reveal that Marge and Homer are on their second honeymoon, and they are on this ship together. Soon after that, though, a mysterious man named Roger shows up in a small rowboat needing rescue. Roger tells a story about how everyone on his original boat was poisoned and died, which makes Homer suspicious. Soon, Roger bakes a pie for them, but Homer chucks it out in the sea, and Marge is like, "Why'd you do that? It wasn't poisoned." And then he says, "Well, it was rhubarb." Immediately, they see the shark from earlier, though, having eaten the pie he just chucked out and immediately dying, which tells Marge and Homer all they need to know. They need to kill Roger before he kills them. And they do, leaving his body at sea. Soon they arrive at the ship Roger came from, and Roger follows, though. Yeah, it turns out he didn't actually die. But it also turns out that he didn't do anything wrong, and the shark died from all the fuel leaking from Marge and Homer's boat. But Homer kills him anyway because he'd tell everybody that they tried to kill him otherwise. Then all the dead people from Roger's ship begin waking up because it turned out they didn't die either. They suspected Roger of poisoning them, so took an antidote first, prompting Homer to kill them for no reason. "You have a flair for avoiding death," he says, before shooting a flare gun at a guy. Out of guilt from killing everyone, Marge kills herself via a poisoned pie, but it all turns out to be part of Maggie's imagination in reality, as she is in a bath playing with like toy boats in the bath. I don't know. Like I said, you can only end these things in so many ways. Is that weak? Yeah, it's pretty weak, but whatever. Next up, 54 is season 29, episode 4, segment 1, called The Exorcist. An Exorcist parody, obviously, where Homer orders baby's first Pazuzu statue and leaves Maggie upstairs with it to go downstairs to attend a party they've set up. Back upstairs, everything immediately becomes spooky and haunted, like letter blocks spinning to spell out 666 and various toys killing themselves and escaping from this impending doom. Maggie soon gets possessed and crashes the party that's going on downstairs, starting off by announcing, "No one leaves alive," in a demonic voice. And then Marge is like, ooh, her first words. Anyway, Maggie kills a couple people before Marge and Homer decide to call an exorcist, who exorcises Maggie successfully. Pazuzu then transfers to Bart's body, but Bart can handle it because he has the darkest soul Pazuzu has ever seen. So now Bart's a demon or whatever, I guess, and that's just kind of how it ends. One of my favorite quotes from this one, another very dark one, is when the exorcist guy says, "If you can't trust a Catholic priest with children, who can you trust?" Oh my god. Anyway, next up is 53. This is season 30, episode 4, segment 2, called Multiplicity. Multiplicity, but Lisa is in the title. Anyway, this is the episode that is making fun of M. Night Shyamalan's Split. When Bart, Milhouse, and Nelson wake up in some old basement, they come to find that Lisa was the one who put them there, with split personality. Upon trying to escape, the various personalities of Lisa try to kill them. Eventually, Bart is left as the lone survivor, and it turns out that Lisa is doing this out of revenge for Bart ruining her schoolwork or something. But when Bart pleads for her mercy as her loving brother, she's turned back to normal, and that's it. He solved her split personality disorder, I guess, just by caring about her. Anyway, my favorite moment from this is after crashing Milhouse's head into the door, Bart says, "Milhouse, put your brain into it. The door's not even scratched." And then Nelson says, "Wait, we're trying to break the door?" Like, he just thinks that they're just hurting Milhouse for no reason. I love it. Then at 52 comes season 14, episode 1, segment 2. This is a gun control episode where Lisa gets all the guns banned in Springfield after reading a gravestone saying, "I dream of a world without guns." And this inspires her. There's a moment where one of the cops is getting rid of his gun, though, that I really liked, where he says, "This always made me feel like a real man, you know? Now all I've got is my enormous genitalia." Oh no, it's genitals. Sorry. Genitals is the word. It doesn't matter. Anyway, From then on, once all the guns are out of town, the grave Lisa saw earlier is resurrected, and it turns out to be Billy the Kid Zombie, who dreamed of a world without guns because it meant that nobody else would have a defense against his own guns. He and more of his cowboy zombies then take over the town. Professor Frink eventually saves the day though when inventing a time machine, and the town celebrates their guns by killing the zombies before they ever resurrect in the past. The message seems to be very American here in that guns are good, until another future version of Homer comes back to the past to warn that guns have destroyed the world in the future. But then Moe shoots him and nobody cares. Next up, at 51, comes season 32, episode 4, segment 1, called Toy Gory. In a 3D animated segment making fun of Toy Story, obviously, Bart kills and tortures his secretly living toys, Sid from Toy Story style, in that he didn't actually know that they were alive. But to get revenge, they turn on Bart and turn him into an inanimate toy. And it's actually kind of disturbing in a way. Next up, at 50, is season 2, episode 3, segment 1, called Bad Dream House. This is the very first Treehouse of Horror segment, and I thought it belonged smack bang right in the middle at number 50, because although it is funny and it's kind of charming, it's got the old classic Simpsons charm to it, it's not all there yet, the writing isn't quite there, and it's just pretty basic. So the Simpsons move into a haunted house, the walls bleed, objects float around, and a voice urges each family member to kill each other. Kind of like The Shining, which obviously will be covered in another segment. Anyway, after a night of following each other around with massive knives, even Maggie, Marge, who's unaffected, has had enough. Eventually, the family pleads to the house to learn to live with them, and instead of doing this, the house basically kills itself, because what could be worse than living with the Simpsons? It's kind of a funny and cute yet cynical joke, and I do like it quite a bit. The best moment in this episode for me is when Homer is calling the real estate agent, and we just see it one-sided from Homer, where he originally goes to complain that they never warned him that the house was haunted, but then the real estate agent obviously, argues back. They get into a bit of an argument before Homer quickly accepts on his side. He's like, he said that he mentioned it 5 or 6 times, but Homer was just too careless to listen properly. This is a very simplistic segment, but it's charming in its own way. Then at 49 is season 10, episode 4, segment 3, called Starship Poopers. Maggie turns out to be an alien with a full set of one fang and gooey tentacle limbs as well. The Simpsons go on to figure out their problem. They take her to Dr. Hibbert, who advises to set her on fire, but they're dead set on trying to help her. I mean, it is their daughter. Soon though, Maggie sends a transmission to Kang and Kodos in space, who come to take Maggie, their daughter, back. It turns out that Marge had been abducted in a flashback and was impregnated by one of the aliens, I guess, via some sort of weird laser impregnating, by the way. It's just like a gun that shoots her. It's not like she actually has sex with the aliens, but that's really besides the point. Anyway, so the episode culminates in a lame Jerry Springer gag that kind of sucks though, because that's just really outdated. I don't know, maybe it was funny at the time, but Jerry Springer's really fucking not relevant. And also, I'm Australian, so I'm not that familiar with Jerry Springer, but it did used to be on Foxtel sometimes, our version of cable. It's not like I ever watched it, so I'm not that familiar with Jerry Springer. So it's kind of a disappointing joke to a pretty good segment otherwise. But it ends when Maggie attacks Jerry Springer and they all end up fighting. And eventually Kang and Kodos end up leaving, and that's just kind of it. I wasn't a huge fan of this one because of the ending, but it was okay. I liked everything that came before that. But my favorite moment was when they are on the Jerry Springer show and it doesn't work, and Marge says, "I can't believe it. Jerry Springer didn't solve our conflict." I did like that one. There were also a couple good moments, there I was having a great time in the backyard as Marge is telling her flashback, and it just shows her putting clothes on the line. That's her great time in the backyard. Then at 48 is season 26, episode 4, segment 3, The Others. The ghosts of the old-timey original animated Simpsons characters are haunting the house. The really old original drawings of the Simpsons are back. And it's just kind of fun seeing them kind of interact together as they're crudely drawn and the voice actors are doing it a bit differently, like how they used to and everything. There's a certain charm to seeing the old version of these characters. When Homer wants to get with the old version of Marge though, new Marge gets jealous and she kills herself to be a ghost as well. Then old version Homer kills new Homer for him to be a ghost too. Bart and Lisa also die, and Maggie mysteriously dies too, and it's all implied that it was Willie who actually killed Maggie. Nobody else, but Willie killed Maggie. Anyway, and he plans to kill the children to make stew. Anyway, both of the Simpsons versions are now ghosts, but it's all interrupted when other alternative versions of the Simpsons show up to move into the house, including an anime style one, there's a 3D look one, and regrettably there's even minion styled Simpsons that show up as well. This kind of just became nonsense in the end, but it was nice seeing the original characters for the moment. My favorite moment though was when Marge is planning to kill herself. She gets into the oven and she says, might as well clean this while I'm killing myself. Next up at 47 is season 31, episode 8, segment 1. This is part of that weird Thanksgiving Halloween episode again. This is called A Gobble Yipto. The Simpsons are turkeys and therefore cannot speak. They just make gobble gobble noises in this episode, which I actually found to be kind of an interesting approach. Like, it wasn't a crutch, it was more like this fun challenge they took on, where we come to actually care about these stupid turkey Simpsons characters without them actually having dialogue. Anyway, soon they begin to get hunted down by Chief Wiggum, who's just like a pilgrim or whatever in this segment. He takes a bunch of the turkey people back to their village, including the Homer turkey, but the rest of his family is safe in hiding. In the village, they kill the Barney, Moe, Lenny, Grandpa, and Patty and Selma turkeys. Homer briefly celebrates the Patty and Selma part, which was kind of funny, before Homer escapes when the town bursts aflame. The segment ends in a chase where Wiggum ends up falling off a cliff, but he doesn't die yet. But then a bear attacks him. And the Simpsons turkeys get out of there along with the newly hatched Maggie turkey that I forgot to mention because they had an egg. They had an egg and that was in danger before. Don't worry about it. They're all turkeys and they live happily ever after or whatever. I did love this one quote from it where it's Reverend Lovejoy's wife. I don't remember the character's name, but she's like, "The Pilgrims! Won't somebody please think of the Pilgrims?" I liked it. Shut up. Then at number 46 comes season 17, episode 4, segment 2, called Survival of the Fattest. This is basically like a Ready or Not the Most Dangerous Game type of episode where Mr. Burns plans to hunt down a bunch of humans in his mansion after inviting them to this dangerous game. He chases down the competitors in a televised sport here called the World Series of Manslaughter. And in the end, after killing many of the people, Marge takes Burns down with a frying pan. And that's just kind of it. It's not a strong ending, but it's a pretty good segment overall, just because I like the premise. My favourite quote from here is, "Homer, we've only been being chased for 6 hours and you've already resorted to cannibalism. And there's a banana tree just up there." And then he's like, "Ugh, they look a little green." Next up at 45 comes season 16, episode 1, segment 1, called The Ned Zone. While Homer's trying to get a frisbee off the roof, he throws a bowling ball around trying to get it down. And he accidentally hits Ned Flanders on the head, nearly killing him, but it actually gives him a premonition instead, and he has these powers where he can see how people die. First, Dr. Hibbert is seen falling from a window, which he does, then Mole Man is eaten by alligators, which happens again immediately. When Homer discovers these powers though, he asks Ned to do him. Upon doing so, he sees that Homer's death occurs by Ned shooting him dead. Managing to avoid this though, despite Homer constantly antagonizing him, Ned realizes he's changed the future, and now he sees Homer's death and everyone else's come by Homer self-destructing the town by the nuclear power plant. Trying to avoid this, he shoots Homer dead this time, but in the death he falls on the self-destruct button anyway, and the whole town explodes. And my favorite part of this episode is when Ned Flanders is watching him about to fall on that self-destruct button, and he's like, don't do it, you'll kill everyone. But there's like a connection issue with the little remote, the radio, whatever the fuck it's called, thing, and it just changes it, the intercom. I've written it down. I've got it written down in front of me, intercom. There's a problem with the intercom. And it changes it to, do it, kill everyone. I found that funny. Anyway, coming in at number 44 comes season 32, episode 4, segment 3, called B9 Rewind. And this is a Groundhog Day episode, basically. At Lisa's 9th birthday party, she finds herself in a Groundhog Day situation. She gets hit by a car smashing through the house, but wakes up before the party starts again. Realizing she can change her fate now, though, she goes back to try to redo the birthday better this time. But of course gets killed in some other way now as well, with a treehouse falling on her. And then again by the ceiling just falling on her. And then again by the bedroom mirror just falling on her. And she just keeps dying in these sorts of ways. Along the way though, she finds Nelson is also in the same temporal loop that she's in, and together they try and help each other. In the end, they break the cycle by killing somebody else and are replacing their deaths Final Destination style. My favorite quote from this is Comic Book Guy saying, "Now look at my black mirror." That's not a reference, it's just filthy. Next up at 43 is season 33, episode 3, segment 3. Lots of threes there, called The Dead Ringer. And this is basically a TikTok episode. Yeah, TikTok is the thing in the Simpsons world now. God damn it. But this is a surprisingly good segment despite that. So, a deadly TikTok acts as the videotape from the ring where it kills anyone who watches it in 7 days. As Bart and Lisa investigate, they get Grandpa Simpson to watch the TikTok and describe it to them. Then Willie gives a backstory to them of an old student, Mopey Mary, who used to go to Springfield Elementary but died in the school well, which we've never seen before, which I also think is just hilarious. But fortunately, on the day that she died, it was at the end of Willie's shift that day, so he did absolutely nothing about it except covering it up. Anyway though, Lisa has a plan to be nice to Mary. So she summons the TikTok spirit and tries to befriend it. But through this, she kind of begins suffocating her socially. And Mary tries to escape from Lisa's friendship. And while trying to get away from Lisa's friendship, Mary accidentally falls down the well once more and the curse is lifted again. My favorite moment from this segment is when they're trying to call for tech support from the TikTok video, and they're on hold, and the voice is like, killing you is very important to us. Please hold. Maybe it's just because I work in an office job and sometimes I have to call certain offices and stuff and listen to these stupid fucking automatic voices, but I enjoyed that quite a bit. Anyway, next up at 42 is season 22, episode 4, segment 1, called War and Pieces. This is the board game episode. This opens with Bart and Milhouse playing Wii, which I guess this came out around, what, 2008, 2009 or something? What season is this? Season 22? Yeah, I don't know, sometime around then. But then Marge tells them to quit playing their violent video game and resort to a board game instead. So they play Satan's Path. And I love the moment they begin to play. Bart's like, here, I'll be the demon, you be the thimble. Anyway, it turns out it's a Jumanji situation. It combines every other board game into existence. And this allows for lots of little random board game gags like chess kills Chief Wiggum, Homer plays real life snakes and ladders, etc. Just stuff like that. Among the chaos, Lisa instructs Bart and Milhouse that they must finish the game for things to go back to normal. And there's this great mousetrap joke in there where the trap doesn't actually work in the end, just like in real life. This segment ends with Bart desperately saying that they'll just play Hangman. And predictably, they then get chucked into a real life version of Hangman and get hung to death. Then at 41 is season 28, episode 4, segment 2, called BFF RIP. During a hide and seek game, Lisa's supposed best friend Janie dies in a cool tragedy where a seemingly possessed lawnmower shreds her to pieces. At the funeral though, Sherry and Terry, Lisa's other friends, give their condolences before immediately being crushed by a grave. Then in therapy, after the therapist tells Lisa to consider her to be a friend, a framed picture falls onto her neck and also dies. It becomes clear that any of Lisa's friends die. Upon investigating, the police notice that the only correlation is that there was a certain nail polish that was found around all of the deaths. Lisa recognizes this as this nail polish that she used to wear around her old imaginary friend Rachel. And then the next day on the way to school, the ghost of Rachel shows up and kills Milhouse. Lisa gets the blame and ends up in jail. There, Lisa says Marge was right when she said that Lisa didn't need Rachel anymore, and Rachel immediately heads over to kill Marge. While Lisa's stuck in jail though, Bart comes to the rescue and breaks her out. And then they save the day, they defeat Rachel and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Something I did not appreciate in this segment was that a cat dies, Snowball 2 gets completely stabbed and then falls into a bin, and then Homer takes out the trash. It's kind of neatly animated and stuff, but come on, you didn't need to fucking stab the cat. Jesus Christ, that wasn't very nice. And then we also see that Homer had a childhood friend named Sergeant Sausage, and he's just kind of adorable, and then he gets blown up in a microwave because this is a Treehouse of Horror episode. Well, what did you think would happen? Then at 40 comes season 33, episode 3, segment 1, called Bong Joon-ho's This Side of Parasite. Starting off in the middle of Parasite's plot, the Simpsons house is flooded, and Bart announces that he's already started a tutor job at a rich family's home, Rainier Wolfcastle's. The rest of the family follows undercover and decides to take advantage of their opportunity. When Kirk Van Houten shows up and immediately gives away that he has his whole family downstairs, you know, not like in Parasite where that's held off for a bit. He just goes straight away. It's funny. He doesn't even try and hide it. Then they discuss who the actual parasite is. It could be the Simpsons for stealing their jobs and feeding off the opportunity. It could be the Van Houtens for literally staying underground and eating bugs or whatever. Or it could be the rich family for exploiting them all. You know, like that one movie, Parasite. This is all before a bunch more people underground emerge though, and it turns out that a lot of people are also living down there. Bart says, geez, how many people live down here? And Sideshow Mel says, people of all incomes, this house is an allegory. Basically then, all the poor people then begin to riot and kill each other and everyone else around them, leaving the Simpsons to be the last ones left alive in this expensive house. And they just kind of live there now, for now. I don't know, there's no real resolution with Rainier Wolfcastle and whatever happens there, the actual owners of the house. Don't know what happened there, but the Simpsons seem fine for now. Anyway, next up comes 39, season 15, episode 1, segment 2, called Frankenstein. Homer gets a call saying he's won the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize? Finally, he says. Turns out it was actually meant to be for Professor Frink because Homer obviously doesn't deserve the Nobel Prize. Anyway, upon actually returning the Nobel Prize to Frink, Homer gets told by Frink this tale about him and his dad. It turns out that Frink and his dad has always had tension between him, and he's keeping his dead father's body frozen at his house. Reanimating him though, by coincidence, his dad immediately goes on a quest to steal people's organs for strength, to strengthen his dead body. Stitching Springfieldians pieces together, Frink's dad decides to make it all up to his son by attending his acceptance of the Nobel Prize. But when saying the acceptance speech with his son, he realizes everybody has juicy brains and goes on a bit of a beheading spree. This episode has some really cool kills, might I add, actually, as he's just kind of tearing people to shreds. I kind of enjoyed it. Anyway, Frink kills him in the end, and that's really about it. The best moment in this part for me was that Jennifer Garner is one of the hosts at the Nobel Prize giving thing, and she's next to the scientist guy, and she's like, you know, our jobs aren't so different. And the scientist is just like, I disagree. Next up at 38 is season 14, episode 1, segment 3, called The Island of Dr. Hibbert. The Simpsons visit the island of Dr. Hibbert, the Island of Lost Souls, it's called, owned by Dr. Hibbert, where a curse turns inhabitants into various animal-like beasts. Marge turns into a Catwoman, and the Springfieldians we know are all various manimals too. Turns out they're all okay with it though when they realize that all they have to do is eat and sleep and mate and roll around in their own filth and mate and eat. And when Homer realizes this, he also accepts to be an animal as well. The best part for me here is when Homer is oblivious to Marge being a Catwoman, and he's like, I've never seen you use your tail like that before. Anyway, at number 37 comes season 24, episode 2, segment 2, called Unnormal Activity. Obviously a Paranormal Activity parody. Spooky things occur during this found footage style segment. And this was kind of a good little segment because it's all the actually interesting things that happen in the Paranormal Activity movies edited into a very short segment. Instead of sitting around waiting for an hour and 20 minutes for something to actually happen in the final 10, this little short 7-minute segment had to cram everything in there right from the get-go. As shit goes down and more chaos ensues though, eventually a demon that looks and sounds like Moe tries to steal Maggie. Then, much like in the movies, Marge then goes on to explain her backstory where she made a bargain with a demon to let her sisters live, but they'll be back in 30 years to take her favorite child. In the end, Homer though makes a deal to have a threesome with 2 of the demons, and that will make it all go away. And then it turns into like this weird rapey joke where the demons are saying their established safe word, cinnamon, cinnamon, over and over again, and Homer's having their way with him, I suppose. I don't know why they thought that would be a good joke to finish this with, but that's what they did. The best part of this episode is when Homer is peeing, and it's in that like Paranormal Activity style where it's like fast forwarding through the night, but he's just peeing for hours and hours and like whistling or singing a song or whatever, and Marge is standing there possessed watching the whole time, but he just keeps peeing, failing to realize that she's there. That was a funny moment for me. There's also a moment where Homer is comforting Lisa and is like, oh sweetie, sometimes mysterious invisible beings from hell waits for a family to go to sleep and kills them. Now go to bed. Then at 36 is season 26, episode 4, segment 1, called School is Hell. In detention, Bart uncovers a demonic curse written on a school desk and gets summoned to hell in a place where it's essentially a creepy upside down version of Springfield Elementary set in hell. Here Bart finds he's actually an A-grade student due to his creative torture ideas, and officially becomes valedictorian. That's it really, he just finds success and it's weirdly wholesome. Next up at 35 is season 11, episode 4, segment 2, called Desperately Zeeking Xena. This is the Stretch Dude and Clobber Girl episode, which is kind of a childhood classic to me. Even if this isn't one of the best segments, I do kind of love that Stretch Dude and Clobber Girl song. It gives me feels for some reason. Anyway, in this segment, Bart and Lisa become superheroes, and comic book guy, as the collector, kidnaps the actor who plays Xena, and they go to try and save her. Failing miserably though, she saves herself by tricking the villain and beats him up. And in this like evil villain lair though, we see that the collector steals people and puts them in like little collectible bags to keep them in mint condition. And it's like, yeah, it's funny, it's weird and whatever, but it's also kind of actually disturbing if you really think about it. Some of my favorite moments in here include this quote where Professor Frink is in a crowd at the Xena convention thing, and he's like, in episode BF12, you were battling barbarians while riding a winged Appaloosa. Yet in the very next scene, my dear, you're clearly atop a winged Arabian. Please to explain it. And then the actor just says, yeah, well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it. Which is kind of a classic quote to me nowadays. Anyway, there's also a scene where after Bart and Lisa are seemingly crushed to death, Skinner says, oh my god, Lisa! Doesn't give a shit about Bart. Next up at 34 is season 23, episode 3, segment 2, called Dial D for Diddley. And oh no, this one is for me because it is the Dexter episode. Ned Flanders is Dexter Morgan here, as he acts as the avenging sword of the Lord, taking out bad guys like Mr. Burns for the voice of God he keeps hearing. But when Patty and Selma are assigned as his next target, it becomes clear that Homer is the one setting this all up. As things get increasingly more petty though, eventually figures out that it's just Homer fucking with him and confronts him. Then God himself crashes through the house and kills Homer himself. And it all turns out that Maud is also with Satan in the end, and I don't know, it's kind of a dumb ending that kind of makes me dislike the Dexter thing a little bit. But hey, it's kind of fitting because Dexter itself has a bad ending, right? I don't even hate the ending of Dexter as much as everybody else. I don't know why I'm saying that, but hey, Gotta say it for the joke. Next up is 33, season 11, episode 4, segment 3. Life's a glitch, then you die. This is the Y2K episode. After Homer doesn't fix the Y2K bugs on the computers at the nuclear power plant, which I guess was his job, the electronics take over the world. There's a lot of chaos in this episode, but once the Simpsons come across Krusty the Clown's death, they find a top secret invite he had on him, which was a rocket to be sent off the Earth, only for the deemed important / famous people. But upon arrival, it turns out that Lisa is allowed on anyway because she's deemed well respected and she's allowed to take one parent, and immediately she's just like, Mum. So Bart and Homer are left to fend for themselves. So they find another spaceship leaving, get on and find out that this is a spaceship for loser celebrities being sent into the sun. Lots of references for celebrities I'm not really familiar with here, like Pauly Shore and Rosie O'Donnell. I know them, I guess. I know them, but I don't really know them. Anyway, maybe this was cutting edge at the time, but it seemed pretty dated here, and I didn't really get the joke all that much. I guess nowadays it would be like Kanye West is there or some shit, and I also wouldn't find it funny because it's just like, oh yeah, just relevant celebrity here. I don't know. I don't give a shit about making fun of celebrities. It's just a lazy joke to me. Anyway, thankfully though, the two decide to commit suicide before actually spending any more time with the loser celebrities and waiting for the sun to kill them. So they eject themselves out of the spaceship and go into space where their heads expand and explode. And there is a very, very fantastic little bit of animation there that honestly I absolutely love and kind of makes this entire episode. By the way, this episode came out on October in 1999, so it was very topical at the time, the whole Y2K thing. There was a joke about the Phantom Menace in here and all this kind of stuff. This is a pretty dated one, but it's also pretty good as well. It holds up a bit despite being pretty dated, if that makes any sense. Next up at 32 is season 9, episode 4, segment 1, called the Omega Man. Nuclear war decimates Earth and Springfield in it, leaving Homer the last man on Earth, who proceeds in fucking around doing whatever the hell he wants. That is until he realizes that some people weren't actually killed, but only horribly mutated. On the hunt for Homer, they follow him back to his house where he finds the Simpsons family is fine. It's here where the mutants turn a leaf and decide to live in harmony, but the Simpsons shoot them with shotguns, and that's how it ends. It's kind of a tacky ending, but that's okay. My favorite quote here is when memories of his lost family are going through Homer's head. He's like, "Little Bart," and he's swinging a baseball because that's a treasured memory that he has of Bart. And then little Lisa, and she also is playing baseball. And then little Marge, and she's also playing baseball, but she actually misses the ball. You just hear the swing, but no hit. Another great quote from this one is when somebody's trying to sell Homer the bomb shelter thing, and he's like, "Yep, this baby is called the Withstandinator. Can take a size megaton blast. No more, no less." So if it's any more, any less, it's completely useless, apparently. I like that. And then another great quote is just one of the ghouls who says, "Oh, come on, we just want to eat your skin." Then at 31 is season 13, episode 1, segment 2, called House of Wax. This is when the Simpsons convert their home into a futuristic ultra house. The AI that is in there then terrorizes the family when it gets jealous of Homer's relationship with Marge. The AI obsesses over Marge and plans to kill Homer, and does so via a garbage disposal built into the dinner table. Then though, it turns out that Homer didn't actually die. I don't really understand that, but the family then decides to disconnect the computer and live their lives after the chaos dies down. It ends though when they give the computer to Patty and Selma, where the computer lives miserably. Next up at 30 is season 14, episode 1, segment 1, called Send in the Clones. When Homer discovers a clone making hammock, he uses it to his advantage to get chores done. And I love the moment where he actually gets the hammock, because directly after breaking it by being too fat, it's another Simpsons fat joke, whatever, a man walks by selling hammocks just on the street straight away. Total coincidence. And Homer's like, "The hammock man, I'm glad he's a little early today." And this is a peak. Homer is just a dumb man episode. The clones are increasingly dumber as the clones all duplicate themselves and they swarm Springfield. To solve their problem, the military, along with Lisa, lures the Homers off a cliff to their deaths via flying donuts hanging by a helicopter. Later though, it's revealed that the Homer that is still left alive was a clone as well, and the real Homer died, being the first one who jumped off the cliff. But Marge doesn't really care when he rubs her back. Next up at 29 is season 9, episode 4, segment 3, Easy Bake Coven. This is the witch episode. Everybody constantly accuses every woman of being a witch in this episode, satirizing cults and mob mentality. After Marge is tested by being pushed off a cliff, the logic being if she's a witch, she'll come back and be tortured, and if not, she'll die fairly, it's revealed that she is actually a witch, and she attacks the crowd and flees. She and Patty and Selma go on to terrorize the town and accidentally discover what trick-or-treating is when Flanders gives them sweets instead of their kids. And it's kind of a wholesome ending, apart from Marge having eaten numerous kids beforehand, but this is kind of like the birth of Halloween, and it's kind of nice. Next up at 28 is season 17, episode 4, segment 3, I've Grown a Costume on Your Face. This is the real-life costumes episode. During a Halloween competition, a witch wins a gift certificate to the Quickie Mart, but isn't wearing a costume. She actually just is a witch. So, when they realize this, they all yell, "Burn her!" Gift certificate, because she didn't earn it. She didn't earn it, right? So when the town turns on her, she curses them by turning their costumes into reality. Meaning that Marge becomes a skeleton, Dr. Hibbert becomes Dracula, Bart becomes Wolfman, Lisa becomes an Albert Einstein, etc. When Lisa realizes that Maggie's costume is a witch though, and she actually now has magical powers, she can be the solution. In the end, she decides to turn everyone into dummies, like the pacifier, not the idiot kind of dummies. And that's it. Creative premise, but the ending is a little bit lame, I suppose. Everybody just turns into dummies. Next up at 27 is season 10, episode 4, segment 1, called Held to Pay. Snake's hair becomes its own evil entity here and possesses Homer when he uses it as a toupee after Snake's death during a failed robbery. And there's a great quote here where he's getting arrested and Snake's like, "Chill out, dude, I'll pay the fine for the robbing people." But then Chief Wiggum is all like, "Not this time, this is your third strike. First you torched that orphanage, then you flamed that bus full of nuns." So it's like, I don't know. They let him off with those, but they won't let him off with a simple robbery. I find that hilarious. Before being executed, though, Snake threatens to kill the witnesses, who Chief Wiggum points out to him one of them is Bart. After he's executed, Snake's organs are all donated, including his scalp, which Homer is set up to take so that he can finally have a full head of hair. And just before the actual, hair transplant, where Homer gets the hair, there's this great quote where he's asking, "This is legal, right?" And Dr. Nick is like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. These drugs will make the operation seem like a beautiful dream." He then punches Homer and digs the syringe into himself before promptly grabbing a dirty pizza cutter and getting started. Once the hair melds onto Homer's brain though, he becomes possessed like a werewolf. Now Snake Homer, Homer being possessed by Snake, goes after the witnesses of the robbery and kills Apu and Mo. Pretty violently too. Like when he kills Mo, he takes out his heart with a corkscrew. It's pretty fucked. Anyway, then after that, Bart is next, but when Homer is trying to resist the urge to kill his own son, he says, "But I love my son." And then the Snake toupee is like, "More than a lush head of hair?" And Homer's like, "Don't make me choose." After that, Snake tries killing Bart using Homer's body. He finally fights it off though in the end, but the hair comes alive by itself before being shot by the police, and that's how it ends. I like this one. It's pretty fun. Then at 26 is season 29, episode 4, segment 3, called Homer. Marge and the kids are staying out of town for a few days, and Homer is stoked to be left alone for days, eating what he wants when he wants and just being lazy in general. But when he quickly runs out of food in his own house, he desperately seeks for more. Anyway, he ends up finding one single frozen sausage in the freezer, and he takes it out to barbecue outside. While trying to cut the sausage though, he accidentally cuts off his own finger, which falls onto the barbecue, and he quickly decides to try it. And then during this scene is this really funny quote where he's like, "Wait, I can't eat my own finger? It's unholy. Also, it's not quite done yet." After realizing that he is delicious to himself though, he swears to never ever eat part of himself again. "I must never eat me again," he says. "On the other hand, is my other finger," and it cuts to him barbecuing his other finger. Obviously, things start to get a little weird when Homer starts obsessing with eating himself here. Soon he becomes skinny and the family arrives back at home. Upon finding out that he's eaten his own legs and most parts of himself, Homer has dwindled down to almost nothing, and Marge leaves him. In the end, Homer decides to do what I guess is a selfless act when he realizes that where he failed as a man, he can success as an ingredient. The end of the segment sees all kinds of restaurants around town using Homer's body parts in their food. It's kind of disturbing, I guess, but that's okay. Surprisingly refreshing and interesting. Yes, it's funny and silly and it's a dumb cartoon and stuff, but this actually had some interesting character moments. I don't know, it kind of felt like a Cronenberg body horror type of thing where, Homer actually progressed. Yeah, there was some character development. I liked it. Then at number 25, we are finally at the top 25. There is season 8, episode 1, segment 1, called The Thing and I. This is the Hugo episode. Bart's twin brother, Hugo. After hearing mysterious sounds upstairs, Bart discovers his long-lost evil twin that Homer and Marge have been keeping in the attic. And then it turns out that Hugo's plan is to sew he and Bart together after practicing on this pigeon/rat that he has. This segment ends with the us twist, where it was Bart who was the evil twin all along, though, swapped at birth. And I don't know, That's kind of cool. Then next up at 24 is season 6, episode 6, segment 3 called Nightmare Cafeteria. This is the one where the teachers all become cannibals at Springfield Elementary. They all eat the bad kids, but as their hunger grows, the reasons for the kids being considered bad just dwindles more and more, as to the point where it gets to if you just drop a pencil, you get in detention and you're getting eaten. And I love how unsubtle Principal Skinner is in this, in particular, about how he feeds the kids other children so that so that when they get cooked, it's even better for the teachers or whatever, which is pretty fucked up once you think about it. But yeah, there's this whole weird cannibalistic meat thing going on, and Principal Skinner is so unsubtle about it. Like in the quote where he says, "Isn't there a little Uda in all of us? In fact, you might say we just ate Uda, and he's in our stomachs right now." Wait, scratch that. And I kind of love that moment. So when the kids start to disappear and the teachers start getting fatter, the remaining kids' anxiety just rises. The climax then takes place above a giant people-sized blender, which Bart, Lisa, and Milhouse all fall into. Which Bart then, though, wakes up from a nightmare. It turns out that this was all a dream, and that he's informed that the only thing that he actually has to be afraid of is that real-life gas outside, and if it seeps in, it will turn them literally inside out, which occurs instantly after he is told this. They all turn inside out, and the episode ends in a musical number for some fucking reason. It's kind of weak. It's kind of a random ending that doesn't really have anything to do with anything else. But before that, it was a very strong episode, if you ask me, so I still think it's a pretty damn good one. I'm just not super into that ending. There was no real conclusion. It was kind of just nonsense, but the whole thing was pretty fun nonetheless, so whatever. It's all good. Next up at 23, there is season 7, episode 6, segment 2, A Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace. This is the Elm Street episode where Willie takes the form of Freddy Krueger, and all the kids realize that they have the same related nightmares, where they're all being terrorized by that same villain. In an attempt to fight against the threat once and for all, Bart willingly sleeps to face off with Willie. In the end, though, it's Maggie who defeats him, and they all wake up safely. And this is a really great episode just because it's fun to see kind of the cool homage stuff to one of my all-time favorite horror franchises and everything. And you know, it allows for some creativity with the animation and all that sort of stuff. There's fun dream sequences, and it's just kind of cool in that way. Like there's an homage to Elm Street 2 where Willie is a tractor rather than Freddy Krueger being the bus like in the movie, and just stuff like that. I appreciate it. There's also that great moment where Homer comes up to a sign on the wall that says, "Do not touch Willie." Good advice. And I also really love, again, Principal Skinner being really unsubtle about things as he's trying to just brush away Willie being Freddy Krueger here, where he's like, there's no mystery to Willie. He simply disappeared. Now let's have no more curiosity about this bizarre cover-up, obviously prompting more intrigue. Then at 22 comes season 7, episode 6, segment 3 called Homer 3 or Homer Cubed or whatever the hell that is. Sorry, I'm stupid. This is the 3D animated episode, at least the first one that we'd ever seen in any of these Treehouse of Horror episodes anyway. This is where Homer discovers a portal behind a bookcase that we've never seen before when trying to hide from Patty and Selma during a visit. Here he finds a 3D world where he gets trapped. While communicating with the family though, he tries to get back, but in the end he ends up falling into the 3D void and arrives in the real world, like the live action world. He walks down the street and for some reason it ends with him walking into an erotic cake store because they really didn't know how to end this one. But before that though, I admire the ambition. I thought it was pretty it's pretty cool to see this sort of 90s animated show, you know, put in all this effort, all this experimentation. It was probably expensive to do this at the time and all that kind of stuff. It's a very genuinely interesting episode. You really actually get invested in Homer and worried about what the hell's going to happen to him in this void and stuff. It's just a really well done episode, to be honest. I appreciate it quite a bit. And I also really love the quote. It's like something from that Twilighty show about that zone. I really love those sorts of quotes. It's kind of like the other quote, I don't remember what season it's from, but they're like, it's like Speed 2, but on a bus. Next up is 21. This is season 12, episode 1, segment 3, called Night of the Dolphin. This is the Snorky episode. Parodying movies like Free Willy, Jaws, and I guess a movie called Day of the Dolphins, Lisa frees Snorky from SeaWorld. It turns out, though, that the intelligent dolphin plans to take over the land from the humans with his dolphin friends. First, they rather violently kill Lenny and the sea captain, and I can't help help but side with them though, especially when they march onto land together and continue to kill. Eventually Snorky reveals that he can talk and demands the humans go live at sea. So the people then fight, with attempt leading the crew, but they all fail miserably, and the episode ends with the people surviving in the ocean. I really love the kind of ominous shots of the dolphins being really threatening, by the way. Like they've got, one of them's got that, like a mace or whatever it is. I don't, they're swinging some sort of weapon around. One's flipping a coin and like with a cigar or whatever, like a mafia guy or whatever. I don't know. They're all like intimidating and stuff. That moment's pretty funny. And then during a news segment, Kent Brockman also reports, he's trying to report on the killer dolphins, but then he's threatened, so he tries to back out of it. So he says, "Did I say killer dolphins? I meant killer Italians. Great bottled nose intelligent Italians." Which is just so stupid, but I love it. Then next up at 20 is season 4, episode 5, segment 3, Dial Z for Zombies. Bart finds a book of curses and attempts to reanimate the cat Snowball 1. In doing so, he accidentally resurrects the dead townspeople of Springfield. Havoc runs amok until the Simpsons undo that curse after fighting through hordes of zombies at the elementary school. And this is just a really well done little segment that gets a lot done in its quick runtime. It's an awesome little homage to George A. Romero's zombie movies as well. But I will say that, you know, it's pretty simplistic and stuff. It's not like the most complex, kind of most intriguing segment. It's just a cool kind of fun zombie thing. I also really like the moment where Homer, after shooting Zombie Flanders, "Dad, you killed Zombie Flanders." And then he says, "He was a zombie? Like, what? He just killed Flanders? Like, he just thought he was an actual guy or whatever?" I love little jokes like that. They're dumb. And then there's also a great moment when the zombies get a hold of Homer and they search for him in the brains, you know, they knock him on the head and they find nothing in there. They have no interest to Homer at all because he has no brains and he serves nothing to them. It's just a great little moment. There's also the quote. And there's also another quote in here which just kind of got my attention for a sec, where they say, "But zombies," and then he says, "Please, they prefer to be called the living impaired." And I'm like, what a modern joke. Like, it's kind of weird. This is what season did I say this was? Season 4, so what's that, like 1992 or something like that, maybe? And yeah, it feels like a joke that they'd write in today. It's just kind of an interesting little thing. They prefer to be called the living impaired. I don't know, just a thought. Next up at number 19 comes season 21, episode 4, segment 2, called Don't Have a Cow, Mankind. Krusty releases new burgers at Krusty Burger, which are cannibalistic burgers where the cows had eaten cows before then being cooked themselves. Cows squared, as the concept goes. Immediately, the burgers initiate a zombie virus though. 28 days later, Bart holed up in his house is hungry for good food, despite an entire bowl of fruit being right beside him. He decides to break into the Krusty Burger, which is conveniently across the road from his house in this segment, which is not the case usually, and eats one of the cannibalistic burgers. Finding out that he is immune though, Ellie style from The Last of Us, they decide to get Bart somewhere. They go somewhere. I don't know. Some sort of safe zone of some sort. Anyway, after a bunch of chaos ensues, the Simpsons makes it to the safe zone and they cure the zombie virus by having Bart bathe in the food that they ingest. This ending is not super creative, but it's fine, I guess. This, though, is a hell of a lot better than the other zombie segment than the one from the earlier seasons that I just mentioned, Dial Z for Zombies. I was impressed by that one when I first watched it, but I gotta say, this one actually improves upon the formula quite a lot and fits a lot more in there, in this little segment. I actually think it's quite a bit better. Some of the best quotes from this one include, "What kind of civilized people eat the body and blood of their savior?" And then Reverend Lovejoy is like, "Oh." And there's also Homer. And then there's also Homer instructing Bart, "Remember, no loud noises." And then as soon as they walk outside, he's like, "Oh man, that breeze feels good." I love little moments like those. Then next up at 18 comes season 31, episode 8, segment 2. This is one of the Thanksgiving ones again. This is called The Fourth Thursday After Tomorrow, and it's a Black Mirror episode. Marge awakens in a white void, and it turns out to be that Black Mirror episode White Christmas, where Marge is an AI and is set to be an assistant to the house. And when the real Marge starts getting jealous of her AI replacement though, they decide to erase the digital Marge after Thanksgiving. But AI Marge forms a plan to create the perfect Thanksgiving meal and then escape via the internet. This was a pretty great one. I love the Black Mirror episode that it's based on, and it even gets a little emotional, this little segment here at the end, when Maggie doesn't know whether to choose the real Marge or the AI Marge, and in the end, the AI Marge escapes in the internet and is happy. And it's just kind of really well done, actually. This was a pretty strong segment. Wow, one of the best quotes from this one are you saying I'm a simulation? No, that's insane. And then Homer replies, "Not anymore. It's chillingly plausible. Then at 17, and this is a bit of a special one. This is season 27, episode 4, and it's just that. Just the full episode. This is the only really exception like this on this list where it's not just a small segment, but a full 20-minute episode of The Simpsons. But it's all Halloween themed, and I've decided to include it. This one is called Halloween of Horror, and it's about The Simpsons as they decorate their house for Halloween. And during Halloween time, apparently, they always call it Ever Scream Terrors, their house, and they're known for being the best Halloween house in Springfield. Before finishing off the house decorations though, they go to the Quickie Mart for more decorating supplies. While there, Homer talks to some of the loser temp employees who are there just for the Halloween season, and Homer ignorantly agrees to help them steal things, which results in them getting fired. The 3 fired employees then tell them that he's gonna be sorry, in which he insists he's sorry now. But they keep saying, "You're gonna be," but he is now. You're gonna be. Anyway, after this, the Simpsons then go to the Krusty Land Horror Nights, obviously based on the Halloween Horror Nights in real life, where Lisa gets traumatized, much like I would in real life. Now she feels like she can't handle anything to do with Halloween anymore, and is triggered by anything scary themed. This does lend for good jokes, but it's surprisingly taken seriously. It's surprisingly heartfelt, and you feel really bad for Lisa, to be honest, as she's being traumatized, literally. Like, it's like PTSD as she's seeing Halloween themed things, and like, it's not all treated as a joke. You just feel genuinely sorry for it. Anyway, so then later on they cancel Halloween and take down all the decorations because of this, but not soon after, those ex-employees of the Quickie Mart show up for revenge, and it is an actual real threat now. In the end, Homer and Lisa fight back with the Halloween decorations to get the attention of the town, resulting in the ex-employees getting arrested and Lisa embracing the season of Halloween once again. It all comes full circle, and it's just a really strong episode. I liked it quite a lot, and yeah, I was impressed with it. One of the best quotes in this one is when Homer is being threatened when the doorbell rings and trying not to frighten Lisa, and he says, "Hey, another visitor. Isn't life funny and safe?" He's like obviously freaking out. Next up at 16 is a surprisingly late one in the game, season 25, episode 2, segment 1, called Oh, the Places You'll Do. And this is basically the Dr. Seuss episode. This starts off with Lisa narrating a story about the Simpsons kids being sick and staying at home while Marge goes out, and Homer takes place of the Cat in the Hat type character where he gets the kids into trouble. Everybody's rhyming, and the animation has a cool art style in this one, and it's not that different from the usual Simpsons look. You know, it's cartoony and stuff, but it just looks a little bit off, making it all stylistic, and it's kind of delightful, to be honest, especially when the gritty side of the show conflicts with the children's story approach when Homer decides to start robbing places and killing people. He basically becomes like Pennywise the Clown or something, as he's the real villain of this segment. Anyway, it all ends with Maggie stabbing him with an umbrella. Just a sweet little ending right there. Next up at 15 is season 15, episode 1, segment 1, Reaper Madness. When the Grim Reaper comes to take Bart, Homer defends him and kills the monster, resulting in death not occurring anymore. That is until Homer puts on the cloak after throwing the Reaper's corpse out in the trash, and he takes on the powers and the responsibility to kill. He's then ordered to kill Marge after a bunch of other people that he's ordered to kill first, and we have a bit of fun. And when he is prompted to kill Marge, he says anything but this. Then it changes to Homer, his like order, and it's like, oh, what was that first one? It goes back to going to kill Marge again. But quickly in the process, just before he actually kills Marge, he pretends to kill her, actually swapping her out with Patty or Selma, I forget which. And he rides off into a motorcycle, escaping from God when he delivers the body or whatever, I guess. I don't know. This ending kind of sucks, but hey, I like the premise before that, so it's still pretty high. Next up at 14 is season 3, episode 6, segment 1. This is an untitled one, the Untitled Monkey Paw Lisa's Nightmare episode. Homer buys a monkey's paw while overseas that will grant you any wish, but will also curse you. It's a fun kind of thing where, like, I love that sort of cliche where you have to be careful what you wish for kind of thing. At first, Maggie wishes for a new dummy, second, Bart wishes for fame and fortune, and third, Lisa wishes for world peace. This dooms the world though when Kang and Kodos come to invade, realizing that Earth has softened up. With no defense, they don't stand a chance. Now Homer, to test the monkey's paw, wishes for a turkey sandwich with no surprises, but then the turkey's a little dry. The turkey's a little dry! He then proceeds to chuck the monkey's paw in the garbage, but not before Ned Flanders catches him and gives it a go and fixes everything, showing up Homer as he always does in the early seasons of The Simpsons. One of the best moments in this episode is when Homer realizes that the shop that he just got the monkey's paw from, he's like, oh my god, the shop I got this from was just there, only for it to pan out, and it's just a little bit more to the side than he thought. He's like, oh no, it's just over there. But it cuts to the guy at the shop, just like in the distance, and he's just saying like, you're going to regret regret this. One flaw that I would say about this segment is not many wishes were explored. Like in a world where anything could happen, it felt like they didn't really get a huge handle on that potential, but it's still a great one. Then there is at 13, season 2, episode 3, segment 2, Hungry Are the Damned. The Simpsons are abducted by Kang and Kodos and some third alien and are suspiciously cooked for and pampered, with plenty of visual gags including the aliens weighing them, constantly drooling and mentioning an upcoming feast that the Simpsons will be at. It becomes clear that they're going to eat them. But when Lisa accuses them of this, they reveal that they were just being nice and they act offended. So they lead them back on Earth and leave. Yet again, the Simpsons are so horrible that they ward off supernatural monsters again. The best part in this episode by far is when Lisa finds a book called How to Cook Humans, but then one of the aliens blows off the dust to reveal that it's actually How to Cook for Humans. But then Lisa blows a bit more of the dust off and it says How to Cook for humans. And then one more time it's revealed that there's more dust and it says How to Cook for 40 humans. Then at number 12 comes season 5, episode 4, segment 2, Terror at 5.5 feet. This is a great episode where Bart sees a gremlin-like creature terrorizing the school bus, but nobody believes him. As his paranoia grows, as does the danger. After Bart sets the thing on fire with a flare gun, Flanders adopts the monster. And it's adorable. While Bart is sent to the mental hospital though, in the car on the way there though, the gremlin shows up again and holds up Flanders' decapitated head. That's what he gets for adopting it, I guess. That's how it ends. This is a really good segment because it actually has tension for as silly as it all is. It's really a great one. You really watch as like nobody believes Bart. It's frustrating. It's really just like a great horror movie or an episode of The Twilight Zone, which I think this is based on or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, one of the best quotes from this one is, "There's a gremlin on the side of the bus." And then Otto driving the bus is like, "No problem, little dude." And then he proceeds to just smash into Mole Man, who's driving his car just next to it, and he veers him off the road and he just explodes. Just casual murder like that is funny sometimes. Then at 11 comes season 5, episode 4, segment 3, Bart Simpson's Dracula. News reports a victim with 2 bite marks on their neck with a Dracula cape left behind, leaving the authorities baffled. In a completely unrelated note, Montgomery Burns is buying the blood bank. Bleeding from his mouth and wiping it up. On the news, he says, "Whoops. Precious blood." Mr. Burns then invites the Simpsons to dinner at the manor. And there he turns Bart into a vampire. And a bunch of hijinks ensue and all that stuff. Till they find out that the way that they can cure the vampirism or whatever is by killing the original vampire, which they do so, and they kill Mr. Burns, but turns out he isn't the original vampire either. They have to kill the head vampire, who I guess in the end turns out to be Marge or something. I don't know. They're all vampires. Who cares by that point? One of the best quotes from this one is that they stumble across this secret door that just reveals to just be a laundry or whatever. And Bart's like, "Lisa, Mr. Burns is not a vampire. And even if he was, we're not just going to stumble on his secret hiding place." And then she's like, "Yeah, you're probably right." And then she turns around and immediately sees like a signed thing saying "secret vampire room." There's also a moment when Homer forgets the word for home for some reason. Now let's go back to that building thingy where our beds and TV is. Then next up is 10. We're finally at the final 10. Can you believe it? The top 10, these are going to be the best ones. I can't believe we're almost finished. Anyway, this comes in season 5, episode 4, segment 1, The Devil and Homer Simpson. Homer sells his soul to Devil Ned Flanders for a donut. He realizes though that if he doesn't finish the last crumb of the donut, his soul will remain intact. This doesn't last long though, and Homer is sent to hell for a day before his trial process. Here he is tortured and cut up in an ironic punishment room. He's put in a donut contraption that shovels more and more into his mouth, which doesn't bother him in the slightest. At the trial, Homer is represented by the worst lawyer, Lionel Hutz, who after fucking up immediately flees. Webster's dictionary defines a contract as something that is unbreakable. After Marge proves that Homer pledged his soul to Marge long ago, he gets off free because the soul wasn't his to give to Devil Ned Flanders. But it ends with Satan making a compromise and damning Homer to having a donut head for the rest of time. Next up at pick 9 is season 10, episode 4, segment 2, The Terror of Tiny Town. This is the Pleasantville episode. On Halloween, Bart and Lisa are left to fend for themselves at home, bored and left without batteries for the TV remote. Bart finds plutonium randomly in the house for some reason and uses that for a battery. This promptly sends them into the TV world. They enter the itchy and scratchy world, who think that they're mean when they laugh at their violent gags taking place. And the rest of the episode is about the cartoon cat and mouse chasing Bart and Lisa throughout the cartoon world, all with cartoon logic before Itchy and Scratchy come through to the real world, but obviously don't pose a threat when they do so because they are just little cats and mice. Cat and mouse. Scratchy falls in love with Snowball too, and Itchy is placed in a mouse guinea pig cage, and that's how it ends. Next up at 8 is season 9 episode 4 segment 2, Fly vs. Fly. This is the Fly episode. After Homer buys a matted transporter for 35 cents and constantly uses it irresponsibly, like reaching for beer from the fridge from the couch, Bart goes on to also use it irresponsibly. He mix matches Santa's little helper and Snowball too before experimenting mixing himself and a fly. In this, 2 versions come out, one with Bart's brain and the fly's body, and the other vice versa. And basically the Simpsons don't notice the fly body Bart's brain one anymore. He leaves or whatever, but they are just left with Bart's body with the fly head and brain, and it's just hilarious seeing them not really act like anything's weird or whatever. They just kind of accept him, and I do love that part. But in the end they end up getting them all back into the matted transporter thing, whatever the fuck it was called. What's it called? Matted transporter. That's what it was called. And I don't know, they live happily ever after or whatever. Yay. My favorite part of this episode is as Bart is fantasizing about becoming a fly-themed superhero. He's just like, I'd be stupid not to do this. Next up at 7 is season 15, episode 1, segment 3, called Stop the World, I Want to Goof Off. Bart and Milhouse find an old stopwatch ad in a comic and order it, and they soon find that the stopwatch freezes time in real life. Pulling pranks at first, like picking Lisa's nose, pulling Principal Skinner's pants down during assembly, taking donuts away from Homer, and humiliating Mayor Quimby in various costumes. Soon, they're caught out though, and the town comes after them crazily, ready to kill right away, even though they only pulled pranks. Like Chief Wiggum is literally willing to shoot them dead, but they stop time just in time, and the bullet like stops before it gets them. Literally the town is ready to just murder these fucking kids. It's so funny. Anyway, so they stop time and the world freezes, everything freezes but then they accidentally wreck the watch in the process, meaning that they are now stuck in time. They decide to attempt to fix this stopwatch, which takes literal decades for them to actually learn, and they unfreeze the world, but replace themselves with Martin first, who the town proceeds to murder right as they were about to attack Bart and Milhouse. The best part of this episode is, upon finding out it was Bart and Milhouse pulling pranks around town, Homer says, "It was those guys," as if he doesn't know who Bart and Milhouse are. Next up at number 6 is Citizen Kang, season 8, episode 1, segment 3. Kang and Kodos invade and abduct the leading candidates for next US president, Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, and then shapeshift into their forms. This takes place in the election of 1996, the year I was born. The rest of the segment is about the aliens trying to seem normal in the president's bodies and failing miserably to do so, unbeknownst to everybody else. In the end, Homer outs the aliens, which only results in Kang being elected and enslaving the humans. I really enjoy this one, especially the part where Kang and Kodos basically solve politics. One of them is like, abortions for all, and the crowd is like, boo, and then he says, no abortions for anyone, and the crowd is boo, and then he says, abortions for some, miniature American flags for the others. Yay. That's all they needed to do. That's all America needs to do. Just do that, guys. Anyway, and there's also a great quote, which is honestly one of my favorite of all time from The Simpsons in general. It's the alien acting as one of the presidents, and he says, as a young boy, I dreamed of being a baseball, but tonight I say we must move forward, not backward, upward, not forward, and always twirling towards freedom. Next up, at number 5, top 5. I'm excited, and get ready for this because it's probably going to be a bit of a surprise. This one is from season 19. Yeah, this is a late one. Season 19, episode 5, segment 2, Mr. and Mrs. Simpson. Sorry, not Smith. This is an outdated parody of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is a movie from like 2007 or so, which like, it feels super out of place watching them randomly now, because like that's not a popular movie anymore. But this is still a really surprisingly strong, just a really funny little segment for some reason. So Marge and Homer both find out that they're both assassins and fight to the death and destroy the house. In the end, they kill Chief Wiggum instead and have sex on his dead body, which does not sound like it would be a good segment. But for some reason, it's just a really pretty hilarious one that, you know, even though it's dumb, I was pretty impressed by it. Just the jokes really land here. There's a really good quote here where Homer's like, now all I need to do is think of a clever line before I pull the trigger. Ooh, that's a perfect one. I don't need to say it out loud though, because I'm by myself. Then, at number 4 comes season 11, episode 4, segment 1, I Know What You Diddly Did. This is an absolute childhood classic episode for me here. I don't know if this one's going to be that popular, but Just to me, this was always my favorite one when I was a kid. After the Simpsons run over Ned Flanders, instantly killing him, they get away with it, but are haunted by threats of being caught out. Eventually, they're driving away from the hook killer straight out of I Know What You Did Last Summer, who turns out to be Ned, who has actually been undead the whole time. Just before they ran him over, he was actually attacked by a werewolf and gained the curse himself. This episode ends with Werewolf Flanders eating Homer. But there is a myriad of great quotes here that I just need to point out because they are all so funny to me. So first up is Homer saying, "He's dead," after killing Flanders, and he pokes him in the eye with a stick. "He's definitely dead." And then he continues to poke. And then one of my absolute favorite moments from this episode is just after Homer has accidentally killed Ned. He says to his dead body, "Okay, I got a plan, okay? First thing we have to do is make sure that nobody knows that you're dead. And if anyone asks, just say that you are not dead." There's also a really, really, really good quote that I always love. This little moment, this exchange when I was a kid, I always thought it was so funny. Where Homer is trying to act out like Ned's death in front of Maude so that they won't be suspicious that anybody murdered him. And he's like, "Hey Maude, look who's helping me clean the chimney." She looks up, she's like, "Neddy, where have you been?" And Homer does like the Ned Flanders voice and is like, "Hi Maude, diddly, I've been having fun with my pal Homer. Diddly." And he's like, "Whoa, it sure is slippery up here." And he chucks Ned Flanders' body like off of the roof violently. But by the time that Maude would have seen this, she's already turned around. She doesn't care anymore. And so it was really for nothing. Then later on at the funeral though, the Simpsons are like, "Try not to look sad. We'll seem suspicious." And then so they all walk in like smiling, broadly smiling into the funeral, which is also hilarious. And then one final little quote, because this is such a quotable episode for me. Homer's instructing his family like where to go from here. And it's like, "Okay, Marge, you hide in the abandoned amusement park. Lisa, the pet cemetery, but spooky roller disco, and I'll go skinny dipping in that lake where the sexy tens were killed 100 years ago tonight." Okay, and now top 3. Are you excited? Top 3. So, first up, top 3, season 6, episode 6, segment 2, Time and Punishment, the time travel one. Homer learns about the butterfly effect as he tries to get back to his original timeline. First, after killing a moth and going back to the future, the big change is that Flanders is the governing body of the world who's enslaved everybody. When Homer realizes Flanders is lobotomizing everyone, he escapes and goes back once again. After a series of trial and error though, and making more and more minor changes, he comes to a few different alternate timelines. One where he's tiny in a giant's world, one where he's rich but they don't know what donuts are, but it rains donuts, which he never finds out because he runs out of there. One where Maggie is an evil entity, and finally one where everything is normal, but they all have frog tongues, which Homer's happy enough to settle on. There's a great little moment here during that Ned Flanders dictatorship part where they're all being made to smile, and Homer looks over to the next guy and is like, "What the hell are you smiling at?" And it's like, everybody's smiling. Obviously, he would know that. I love it. Anyway. Then number 2 is season 4, episode 5, segment 1, Clown Without Pity. This is the Child's Play Chucky talking crusty doll episode. The doll haunts Homer, but nobody believes him. And everything is resolved, though, when they figure out that the doll has just been set to evil. And that's all that happens in the end. And it's just as simple as that. And some great moments here include one of the most classic, iconic scenes in all of The Simpsons, where Homer is talking to, I don't know what he is exactly, but a guy that knows about this sort of stuff. And the guy tells him, "It carries a terrible curse." Homer's like, "That's bad, but it comes with free Froggit." "That's good." "Yogurt, the yogurt is also cursed." "That's bad, but it comes with free topping." "That's good." And there's also the part where the doll says, "I'm Krusty the Clown and I'm going to kill you." And Homer laughs it off and says, "I didn't even pull the string that time." Totally unsuspiciously. Like he doesn't know. Like he doesn't think anything of it. Number 1, my very favorite one, and I can't believe I'm actually gonna finally finish recording this because I've been doing this for an embarrassingly long time. And you all saw this one coming. I went with the safe one. I'm so sorry because this is a boring pick because it's probably like everybody's go-to. But it's my favorite. It's season 6, episode 6, segment 1, The Shinning. Do you want to get sued? This is an absolute classic. This you can't argue against this one. Okay, The Simpsons experience The Shining. This time, what sends the father of the family insane though is no beer and no TV. Homer thusly comes for his family to try and kill them, but all is resolved when Lisa exposes Homer to television. Then they freeze together in the snow. And the best line here is, "No TV and no beer make Homer go something something." Marge tries to help. "Go crazy? Don't mind if I do!" Ah! And then he goes nuts. And then there's the whole part where he's like, "Give me the bat, Marge! Give me the bat! Give me the bat! But, ooh, ooh!" that part, you know that part. It's the best. I love it. It's probably my favorite Simpsons moment. That very moment right there. But another few great quotes from this little segment here is Mr. Burns, after the shining blood comes out of the elevator. He's like, that's odd. Usually the blood gets off on the second floor. And then finally, one of my favorite quotes from this episode is also Marge calling help for the police. She's like, police, my husband's on a murderous rampage. Over. And then they're like, oh, well, thank God that's over. I don't know. It's hilarious. I love it. I love it a lot. And that's it. Those are my, not just my favorite. Those are the rankings of every single one of the Treehouse of Horror segments. There you go. I did it. I can't believe I did it. We're over. Woo! Thank you for watching. If you're still watching, that's incredible. This is quite a long video, I imagine. And it's going to be a pain in the ass to edit, but I'm glad I did it. Happy Halloween and all that shit. And yeah, so I'm going to finally go because I'm sick of recording. So that's it. The shinning, I think, is the very best one. And the diving bell and whatever it's called with the farting homo is the absolute worst one. And then there's all the other shit in between. You know, you literally just listened or watched or whatever to this entire video. So this is redundant. Before you go though, please do the things, which are like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit. And I'm outie. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.